States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have one thing we need to take out of order just because the fire chief needs to be in two places at once. So if there's an appointment of firefighter Zach Phillips, chief, you come up here with your candidate, please.
It's actually not me, it's our appointee candidate who needs to get to paramedic school for 6:30 and not miss any time. So I'm not sure if the select board knows, we had one of our career members who had been here less than a year resigned. He moved on to a department up more in North Worcester County, which is close to where his father lives, and he wanted to live closer to family. So it's been very difficult to hire firefighter paramedics nowadays. This is the most challenging time since I've been a fire chief and trying to do it. And because it's so hard, I tasked my deputy to go through that process of looking for candidates, and then he put together a team for interviews. So this is Deputy Jason Bangma. I'll let him spend a few minutes here.
So we put out the posting for it. We got 20 applicants with a wide range of qualifications, from very qualified to a barber. We narrowed it down to the top 6 candidates, and we called them in for interviews. Myself and Lieutenant Burnham, Lieutenant Nudd, and Firefighter Anderson all conducted the interviews. During the interview, it was obvious that Zach has some passion and enthusiasm for the fire service, and all of us agreed he was our top candidate. A little bit about Zach. He is Pro Board Firefighter 1 and 2 certified. He is also an EMT, currently in paramedic school, which is why we need to move forward with this. He has some past experience working as a call firefighter with the Leicester Fire Department, an EMT with Leicester EMS, and per diem EMT firefighter with the Shirley Fire Department. And here's Zach.
Yep, so this is Zachary Phillips. I just asked the board to appoint him as a career firefighter EMT at the entry starting rate for the bargaining unit.
All right. If we could have a motion under 8A on the documents.
I move to appoint Zachary Phillips to the position of firefighter EMT at a starting rate of $24.83 per hour.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, you're appointed. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Congratulations.
and thank you for the consideration.
Thank you.
Do we have any citizen statements and petitions? Anybody that wishes to speak? All right, then you'll see the next on the agenda is an Eagle Scout citation for Brian DeBowick from Troop 1 Mendon. And actually he is, I don't know, is his family, anybody on there remotely? Okay, well, for those who weren't aware, Troop 1 Mendon has been a Boy Scout troop since 1926, continually chartered in Mendon. It's chartered by the American Legion post here in town. And Brian has the distinction of being the 100th person, 100, and I do say person now because both boys and girls, men and women can join Scouts. But he is the 100th Eagle Scout to have earned the rank from Mendon. And there's dozens that have also earned from Troop 44, which has been around for much less time. But it's Mendon's percentage is pretty high of young citizens that earn it. But if I could have one of you read this citation, that'd be great.
Recognizing Troop 1 Mendon, 100th Eagle Scout. Whereas in this era when traditional precepts of faith and morality appear seriously threatened, it's refreshing to find wholesome young American men and women who support and respect our sacred institutions and whereas the Boy Scouts of America instills teamwork and leadership qualities in young men, further promoting the development of strong character, good citizenship, and lasting friendship. And whereas the Boy Scouts of America have made vital contributions to the youth of Mendon through training in the art of living in the great outdoors while building self-reliance. And whereas Scout Brian Dubois earned 26 merit badges and served his troop in a variety of leadership roles. Scout Brian Dubois has completed his Eagle Scout Leadership Service Project at Daniels Farmstead by leading the community members to clear the trails, create additional trails, and mark all trails so the farm could open them for public use. Now, therefore, we, the Select Board of the Town of Mendon, Massachusetts, do hereby on this date, October 26th, 2022, award this citation to Brian Dubois. Has completed all of the requirements to earn Scouting's highest rank under the outstanding leadership and direction of Scoutmasters and other adult leaders of Troop 1, Mendon, Massachusetts.
All right, do I have a second to ratify this?
Second.
All right, all of you in favor of issuing this citation? All right, well, thank you all very much. And again, congratulations. I will say that next, I believe it's next Thursday night. There's actually a court of honor, and our state rep and state senator will be there, and I'm also committed to be there as well to present the citations to Brian and recognize him. So congratulations to Brian, and if everybody makes sure they sign the document that I have in here before we head out. Lonnie, do you want to also you want to vote or comment about Troop 1 Mendon's 100th Eagle Scout?
Oh, that's awesome news. I actually hadn't a chance to even review the agenda yet. I just got to where I'm going, but that's great news. I'm glad to hear that we've reached that milestone. And thank you so much for doing all that you do for the members that take care of all the Eagle Scouts, and for all you Scouts that, especially the ones that achieve the Eagle Scout level. Yeah.
And I think I just was saying, besides this gentleman who's number 100 from Troop 1, I think there's at least 25 that have earned that same rank from Troop 44. So it's pretty pretty significant. So, all right, so let's open the public hearing for new license to store flammable combustibles for Mr. Ohanassian, 147 Hartford Ave East. Do you want to come up, sir?
They're the same email. They have all of them on that one email. If you scroll up.
The Select Board hereby gives notice that it will hold a public hearing on October 26, 2022 at 6:10 p.m. in the Town Hall Upper Meeting Room, 20 Main Street, Mendon, Massachusetts, 01756, to consider the application for a new license to store flammables/combustibles by Harry Ohanassian, 147, 149, and 163 Hartford Ave East, Mendon, Massachusetts, under MGL Chapter 148, Section 13. All interested parties will be given an opportunity to be heard.
Does anybody want to speak?
Need to make a motion to open the hearing.
I think that's what he just did, right?
I move to open the public hearing to consider the application for a new license to store flammables combustibles by Harry Ohanassian, 147, 149, and 163 Hartford Ave East, Mendon, Massachusetts, 01756.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I guess I have a housekeeping question. I know that there were other permits or other actions taken in front of other boards previously that may have expired. And I think the conversation was we could issue this, but if it was, as long as it was contingent on the others being renewed.
We're up to date. As a matter of fact, I have a building permit that was issued a few months ago for the property, for the convenience store, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if that answers your questions.
Yeah, do you want to be heard, sir?
Yes,
Well,
good evening.
it's motion made and seconded, so we haven't voted yet, but this is really having a discussion, so. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Hal Chuba. I'm a consulting engineer in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. I'm working with Mr. Ohesian on the permitting for the fueling system. I believe you are correct, and Mr. Ohesian is correct. All permits are in place, and I believe we have a building permit issued for this property to construct the 4,000 square foot convenience store. And this has gone through planning board review, and we're here for the license, and I'm here. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have regarding the fueling system. I believe this was reviewed by the fire department, and the fueling system will be in compliance with all state, federal, and local fire codes and environmental codes. We propose two underground fuel storage tanks. Each one has a 15,000 gallon capacity. There would be two double wall tanks with interstitial space in between for 24-hour monitoring. And as I said, this would be in compliance with all state, federal, and local regs. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have regarding the fueling system. Thank you. That's why I'm here.
Okay, that just a little housekeeping thing, just to make it a point. We made a motion made and seconded to open the hearing. So all those in favor of opening the hearing?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Okay, thanks. So now we need a motion to consider the application.
So moved.
Yeah, so there are,
Do we close the hearing before we do the license or?
Yes,
yes,
yes.
yes. So I need a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Oh, somebody has their hand raised? I'm sorry. Who was that? Karen, I can't read it from here.
Hi, I just want to make sure that this was commercially zoned and not residential.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
go ahead.
I have some comments. When this came up before here, I was trying to do my research. So I talked to the town planner and I got all the documents. The initial variance and stuff, all of this was granted in 2011. It's the opinion of the town planner that is expired. That is what I was told. And that's what the abutters were told when they asked. So I'd like to clarify that. I'm not comfortable going on a nearly 10-year-old permit if the abutters could have changed. in that
Correct.
time.
No, about 8 months ago, we were in front of planning board and they had some dates that they had to rectify with the original decision.
Okay.
And they did that and they voted on it and brought it all up to date.
So,
But
but
was
is-
the
Was it a
date-
public
Yeah.
hearing for the abutters? Were they notified? I mean, this is not my wheelhouse here, but 10 years is a long time.
True. I'm not sure, we applied, we went in front of them, we set the meeting. That's all I know.
And just to your point, there was a variance from the ZBA as well as a special permit for the planning board. Is that right?
Granted in 2011. or
Right.
2012.
So, but I mean, I think those are two separate. So if we were to, I would say if we were, anything we do here would be contingent upon routing slips and any potential
Right.
outdated permits. Because I think I hear planning board, but I haven't heard ZBA, and I'm not sure you need to go in front of the ZBA again, but I think there was a variance due to the nature of the lot. I think
Yeah, there's a setback.
the
variance.
tanks might be in residential, but the building might be in commercial. I think.
No, it was the
I mean,
septic.
if
Sure, go ahead,
if I
Lonnie.
may, sorry. So if we go back a few years, right? Back then, they would have needed a variance and a special permit for all of this. Now that area is zoned commercial, it probably just falls under site plan review. I don't know exactly because I don't have all the statistics right in front of me at the moment, but my guess is now it only requires site plan review to issue the building permit. So I'm not sure, and I'm not sure of the process either, so don't hold me to it. But because it is zoned commercial in that area now, it's a complete game changer as far as any of those variances and things would be concerned.
And actually that when we were preparing all the motions today, At the suggestion of the town planner, we've added the language that are all interested, the language that pending the approval of final permits from the appropriate departments will be added to here. So in other words, if we pass this motion now, you won't have to come back here, but you still have to go through all the rest of the process with all the other departments and all the other boards. And Lonnie's right, we did rezone that area a few years ago at town meeting, right?
Are there any outstanding boards that you have to go to, or is your understanding that you're done?
With the building permit in hand, just looking now for the tanks for the fuel. And then once we start construction, actually the fire department will get involved in whomever along the way. But I believe we're in good shape to go.
Could you repeat when you said you went before the planning board again about 8 months ago? Is that,
Maybe even less. It's probably, it was in the spring.
was in the spring?
Mhm.
You don't remember what month?
I do not.
So I watched those two videos just to make sure I was fully versed. All I can remember is the planning board said they needed to update dates. That's the only discussion that happened. So I don't think there were any abutters there. Having watched the videos myself. And I know this is we're not the planning board, but it's.
I have some more information. I also have some more information. I happen to be with my brother where we're traveling.
Okay, cool.
So Harry, just so you're clear too, you just submitted site plan review to the planning board last week. They just scheduled the hearing, so there will be a butters notifications and a complete hearing for site plan on this project. Why you think you have, I'm not sure why you think you have a building permit at this point, but if you do, you should.
All right, thank you. That clears that up, Lonnie. Yeah, thanks.
Does anybody else want to be heard?
Karen has her hand up.
Yeah, Karen, is your hand still up or did it just not get put down from before?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't put it down.
Okay, then I would look for a motion to approve the application.
I move to close the public hearing to consider the application for a new license to store flammables, combustibles by Henry Anderson, 147, 149, 163 Hartford Ave East, Mendon, Massachusetts, 01576 under MGL Chapter 148, Section 13.
Second?
Second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor to close the hearing?
Aye.
Okay, now we'll go to the motion to approve the application.
I move to approve the application for a new license to store flammables, combustibles by Harry Ananesian, 147, 149, 163 Hartford Ave East, Mendon, Massachusetts, 01756 under MGL Chapter 148, Section 13, pending the approval of final permits from the appropriate departments.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies.
And now we have another hearing for Applewood Lane, Brookview Lane, and Willowbrook Lane. Somebody could please read the hearing notice?
In conformity with the requirements of MGL Chapter 82, Section 22, the Mendon Select Board hereby gives notice that it will hold a hearing on October 26, 2022 at 6:20 PM in the Town Hall Upper Meeting Room, 20 Main Street, Mendon, to consider laying out and accepting Applewood Lane, Brookview Lane, Willowbrook Lane, Mendon, Massachusetts. All interested parties will be given the opportunity to be heard.
Second.
I'm not sure does that even need some?
I move to open the public hearing to consider laying out and accepting Applewood Lane, Brookview Lane, and Willowbrook Lane, Mendon, Massachusetts.
Second.
Cindy, you have a question, comment?
I have a really minor technical question comment that by the time I'm done will be done. Technically, according to my computer, it's 6:19 and you notice this for 6:20. So you have to wait probably 30 seconds before you can open the
Oh,
hearing.
I'm sorry, I was looking at the clock in front of me and my computer says 6:20.
Okay,
So-
if you're right, you're right. As long as something says 6:20, mine didn't. That was my only comment, and I'm sure it's 6:20 all around every place right by now.
So motion's been made to open the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor to open the public hearing?
Aye.
All right,
All
and
right.
it is after 6:20.
On my computer at 6:20.
Right. Just gonna get my pen so I can mark off where I am, so I don't lose my place here. Does anybody else need to be heard about this public hearing? And I know talking to the highway surveyor, he had indicated that everything had been done, everything was cleared, the bonds, everything was squared away for all three of these. Willowbrook Lane has been, it's over a decade since that one was first started. So at this point, I guess I look for a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing to consider laying out and accepting Applewood Lane, Brookview Lane, and Willowbrook Lane, Mendon, Massachusetts.
Second.
All right, all
Second.
those in favor to close it?
Aye.
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 All right. So now we have to do three separate motions, one for each of the three roads. And if this is in this layout, and then once we do this, it still has to go to town meeting to be accepted. Right. So if we,
I move to approve the layout of Applewood Lane as a town way. It is in the opinion of the select board that the common convenience and necessity require the laying out of town ways at this location.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
I move to approve the layout of Brookview Lane as a town way. It is the opinion of the select board that common convenience and necessity require the laying out of town ways at this location.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the third?
I move to approve the layout of Willowbrook Lane as a town way. It is in the opinion of the select board that the common convenience and necessity require the laying out of town ways at this location.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. So those three are all set. Any other questions on this? Let's go on to number 7, discuss implementing this bylaw. And by the bylaw, I'm speaking about the one that passed at the May annual town meeting and that was approved by the Attorney General in the beginning of September, which indicates that anyone who's elected to the select board or the planning board may not be appointed or otherwise serve on the Conservation Commission or the Zoning Board of Appeals. And just to refresh everybody's memory, the last time we met, Town Council had indicated that she had an appointment with somebody at the AG's office. It had also spoken to me, but she was going to speak with the next day, and I believe that they had no comment, but that Cindy does have more information. So I'd give the floor to our town council to just tell us what the additional information that you have.
Okay, the additional information I have is not all that much. As I said, you should have information from Kim that I sent to you all. When I spoke with the AG, she said she passed the article regarding Springtown meeting, and she did not look at anything beyond whether the bylaw was inconsistent with state law. That is the limit of her role and the limit of her ability to act on anything. She never even looked at the issue of how it would be applied. She did acknowledge that as a general rule, bylaws are applied prospectively. She does find the phrase "or otherwise serve" to be ambiguous and concludes that as written, the bylaw does not require that a current Conservation Commission or Zoning Board of Appeals member be prohibited from finishing their current term. She takes no position as to how the select board chooses to interpret the language and defers to town council. That's the extent of what she said.
So it basically just the same thing she told me. But, and again, this wasn't the actual AG. This was somebody in the local services area of the AG's
No.
office that you spoke to, right?
No, I spoke with Kelly Gunnigan, who wrote the decision.
Right.
I spoke with Kelly Gunnigan in the AG's office. She's the AG who was in charge of approving this bylaw.
Okay. I know you sent us an email specifically about the Conservation Commission, public hearings, and when and if we could remove somebody and how we remove them and when we can't. Can you comment on that?
Under the statute, you can only remove a conservation commission for cause. After doing a fair amount of research and having some of our associates do a fair amount of research, there's really no guidance on what constitutes for cause. Whether or not a change in the bylaw constitutes for cause is really, there's no legal guidance to say one way or the other. I think it could be justified whichever way you decided to interpret it. I also think that, just like Kelly said, you are not required by the language of the bylaw to force people to step down before the end of their term. But whether you choose to or not, that's also an open question. So the language of the bylaw and the language of the Conservation Commission Act do not give you definitive answers to address your question. You
Right.
have to have cause, and the question is, can a bylaw change because? It's more than just an opinion of someone. If the board decides that, this change is enough to be for cause, then you could go down that route. Whether it's challenged or not, I can't say. Whether
So the
you-
question is, she deferred to town council, your town council. So I'm asking you, does this bylaw change constitute cause or not? Yes or no?
I can't give you a strict yes or no. I know that's not what you want to hear. After extensive research, we haven't found anything that analyzes for cause. Oftentimes for cause is misbehavior, something illegal, something that has been conduct relating to an individual, charges against an individual. That being said, we have found nothing that says a change in a law can't be considered for cause. Just like the Attorney General said, you are not, which I agree 100%, you are not required by the language of the bylaw that was passed to require anybody to step down before finishing their term. Does that mean you cannot do it? Neither of us have found any definitive language that says one way or the other. It's an open question. I know that's not the answer you want. I can only tell you what I've said and what she reiterated. Generally, these things apply going forward. We both agree the language is ambiguous, but as I've said consistently, it's the board's decision on how they are most comfortable proceeding, and it's one of those rare situations that I can look you all in the eye and say, whatever position you take, I can with a straight face defend it. Can I tell you with certainty you won't get challenged? No, because I never can. Can I tell you for certainty if you are challenged, you will win or lose? No. I can tell you, you are most likely not going to be successfully challenged if you view the bylaw as applying prospectively and not forcing anybody to give up a term. That being said, I also cannot sit here and tell you if you take the other course of action that you would definitely lose any challenge.
Just a clarification, everything we just said had to do with the Conservation Commission, which has specific guidelines for removal for cause. Would that hold true? What's the other committee? ZBA. Does a ZBA member have does it hold true for ZBA as well?
Oh, ZBA also has a for cause. situation. But I thought it was planning board and conservation commission.
No, planning board is the elected position,
Right.
one of the elected positions. We have one individual who serves, who is,
The same.
After- yes, so the planning board he's appointed to the Conservation Commission. We have another gentleman who is elected to the planning board, who serves on the zoning board of appeals. So both of them run afoul of this potentially. So the question is, now, I think it is clear though, and I think the new chair of the Concom first pointed out that there is a public hearing requirement for the Concom. Is that true?
Requested, as I put in my email, if requested by the person, they can
Okay.
request a hearing.
So before we can, so what is the process? If we make a decision and were to remove them, then they would have to ask for a hearing? Is that right?
They would have to ask for a hearing.
Okay, so the hearing happens after. Now, what about the ZBA? Is the language the same for the ZBA, or do they not have the right to request a public hearing?
I
Do you
have to
know?
double check on that. I do know the ZBA has the same for cause requirement. So.
Go
it
ahead,
was
Mike.
For cause. I have to go back and check on whether they have the same hearing requirement.
So just one
But
thing.
I
I mean,
don't, it doesn't jump out that the hearing requirement was specified, the for cause was.
So we've talked about this a couple times. I just want to make sure, I mean, the board taking an action is actually a second step. When my assumption was that voluntary resignation would be the action to be taken
Yes.
due to the bylaw change.
Both of them had declined.
Declined, okay. So
Both were asked,
Head without.
right,
okay.
Right.
All right,
but
just wanna make
both of them were asked and declined to resign. Because both of them felt they
hold on,
didn't
though,
need to.
Right, fair enough.
Because the both of them, hang on, because both of them feel that they should be able to serve out the term. When you apply the bylaw, I'm sorry, prospectively, I hope I'm saying it correctly, as is how most, or how bylaws are applied.
Correct, right.
Yes, I also wanted to weigh in on this because I didn't really have much to say last time because I was still doing my research and sort of considering the angles. But I also, I talked to a number of people and many of them agreed that, in this position, the most appropriate thing is for the individuals to resign, having heard that the public voted that they don't want people serving. I think that the wording in the bylaw is no elected member of the select board or planning board shall be appointed to or otherwise serve on the conservation committee or zoning board of appeals, either as a member or alternate member. And so as a case in point, I was recently elected to the select board and I had been serving on the taxation aid committee. And the town clerk advised me that it was appropriate for me to resign from that position because I'd been appointed by the select board and she felt that it was a conflict for me to serve on a board that was appointed by the same board that I was elected to. And I know it's not entirely parallel, but there was a change. And so I like listening to people that I've talked to, voters that I've talked to, many of them interpret this to be that they would like to see this change happen. So and so I think out of respect to them, it would be appropriate to consider resignation. But I just wanted to say that I'm willing to support the direction of moving towards removal, if that's the case. I just wanted to put it out there that I would appreciate, like, just as, as a resident of the town, that I would appreciate if they would consider resignation as well. And it's not personal. I don't actually know the individuals involved. It's a question of following the wishes of the voters of Mendon.
I would
Well,
agree with most of that. Hold on. I would agree with most of that. Elena, that yes, these people deserve the same respect for all the time that they've served as well, right? These people also this law came into play in midstream of their appointment. The law about us being on the select board and resigning from all the other boards has already been in place. It's there. We know that going into it, right? This is something that's come along. So And it would be, again, back to the respect thing, that these people have served for so long on these committees, to just throw them out and not let them finish off their terms, when bylaws are supposed to go, moving forward, not at a space and time, even by the wording from the AG and our town council, that's the proper process for this. That's how things should be played
That's-
out.
I didn't interpret it that way. It's the supposed to versus how it's most often done. And I do appreciate the time that the individuals have put into serving Mendon, and I don't want to have it seem like this is any sort of dishonor on them. It's about trying to adapt to the new bylaw, to the new change, and also in particular, these boards make decisions on developments, and right now there are developments that are under consideration, and so it seems inappropriate to me for one board to make decisions, for two boards not to make independent decisions about some of these developments. So I think it's more appropriate for them to be independent. And so to go along with something that Mike Goddard said last time, like, this is the direction that we're going. We need to, maybe we need to rip the Band-Aid off. I think that was the metaphor that you used. So I'm now, I've come around to that after talking with a number of people in town. And it's not personal, and it's still respecting all of the work and the hard work and hours that these people have put into the town. Anyhow.
I'm just wondering, Elena, did you talk to any of these boards and ask them their opinion on how that works, and how that they are already independent of each other, completely separate in the decisions that they make, and how helpful it is to have people on these boards? Again, we don't need to hash out this
Right.
thing, but it's 100% personal. It was completely 100% personal, is where this whole bylaw came from. And this is why we shouldn't do citizens petitions. We should bring these things to the Board of Selectmen so we can vet them correctly, so we're not sitting and wasting months and weeks on this.
Also, I also think that there is sort of a cautionary tale here about these citizen petitions and bylaws, that the wording, because it has this ambiguity, makes it difficult. And so for people who are putting these petitions forward in the future, it might be helpful to consider cases like this of how we move forward should a bylaw be implemented. But just also to the point about whether these boards are actually acting independently, I don't know. And because again, I don't know the individuals, but I know that they are making decisions on some of the same developments.
If I could just speak to that one question for a minute, without regard to composition of any boards, all of the boards involved in a project have independent roles, standards, and areas of inquiry that they are allowed by law to address. So the individuals on the board cannot change what the board is allowed to look at, and each board has its own independent jurisdiction of what it looks like. Concom looks at wetlands. Planning looks at subdivision approvals. Zoning looks at variances. Usually the planning board is a special permit granting, but they all are separate and independent and have separate and independent hearings, requirements, decisions. So they are all independent actions regardless of the composition of the board.
But
I have two other quick things. So sorry, go ahead.
I was just say they're independent areas of focus, but they are all focused on the same project. So I would say that they all have a say in the single objective within the town. So I understand what you're saying, but I think the broader, the diversity of thought was sort of one of the things put forth at town meeting. So you had different ways of different perspectives being brought to all these different areas. That's all on the same project.
And I see that Kyle, the current chair, has his hand up, and I think Kathy Schofield too, but I do have one question. Town council had sent a lengthy email that I think all of us were able to review, but under the heading of Conservation Commission appointment or removal, there is a sentence or a couple of sentences that says, Although the selectmen are the appointing body and have the power to remove the commissioners for cause, they do not have supervisory authority or managerial control over the commission's day-to-day activities, nor are the commissioners in the business of delivering government services. Their role is rather one of implementing and enforcing state and federal environmental policies. And this is a question for council. Does that last sentence that says that, they're not involved in the delivery of services, does that somehow negate their ability to interview and recommend their own members that would be, I realize the appointing of members of the commission, of the Conservation Commission, is under the purview of the select board. But does this phrase says that, nor are the commissioners in the business of delivering government services? Does that somehow suggest that they have to be separated from choosing who actually gets put on their own board?
No, the point of that, from that case, is that the select board can remove people for cause, but they can't get involved in whether they like the policies or the politics of what the person on the board is. That's not their role. That's for the Concom. Just like it's not for the Concom to say what policies the select board should do. It's not at all about the appointment.
So
Your
this,
job as selectman is to appoint, but not to get involved with, once you've made the appointment, the Concom is independent of you.
so right. Now, what about, nor are the commissioners in the business of delivering government services? What does that mean?
That means they're not supposed to get involved about whether or not, that they want to get involved in things the selectmen do as a regular course. It's both ways. It's like you have separate provinces, you respect theirs, they're supposed to respect yours. They have a very finite, limited marching order by statute, and that's all they can do. The select board has a much broader, more policy-oriented and sets policy, and the Concom doesn't have the right to impede that, just like the select board can't impede on the Concom's role. It has nothing to do with appointing of people. It talks about the Concom's supposed to be dealing with environmental and federal policies and wetlands concerns. They're not supposed to be looking at other issues.
So there's a separation. So the separation of power where the select board makes the appointments and then the members that are appointed take care of those environmental issues that they're tasked with looking at.
Correct. Yes, the select board's involved in the thinking being, because you're elected by the general public, you will put people on the board according to what you believe the general public would want you to do, or who they would be supportive of. And that's the reason for it. But that your role ends there. You don't have license to go in and sort of dictate how the Concom functions.
So if
It
the
really has to do-
townspeople pass this bylaw that says or won't otherwise serve, then that's what the people want, and our job is to do what the people want.
And the bylaw language is ambiguous, and generally it would be prospectively applied going forward. But as I've said before, there is nothing either the AG or I can point to that would prohibit either way you go.
Okay. Kyle, you have your hand up? I think you're muted, maybe, Kyle?
Right, now can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
My point about the independence of the Concom was covered quite well by the previous two speakers. I will add that once we get up to a full 7 members, that gives us a broad range of diversity and able to look at all of the facets of a particular issue. One person out of that 7 isn't able to have undue influence.
And the numbers are, it says you have not less than 3, no more than 7. So you can operate with anywhere between 3 and 7. Okay. Anything else, Kyle?
In terms of my job is risk assessment, and my way of rephrasing the question you asked town council earlier is, if this matter were litigated either by one of the current members of the board or by a member of the community who sponsored the bylaw petition, how likely is it that a judge would find in the town's favor if whichever the town decided? I mean, part of the problem is that when you go to court, it's a toss-up as to what the judge will rule. So does the town Board of Selectmen, what level of risk are you willing to incur?
I don't quite know how to answer or what you want me to answer, because you ended up asking the selectmen the level of risk. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. What a court would do, it's, it can depend on the judge and on any given day. Do I think there is legal support to apply this going forward and allow them to complete their terms? I do. I do think that is a relatively strong legal position. That being said, I can't sit here and tell you, given the language and the situation, that it would be unjustified. This is one of those very strange, which is why we really don't like citizen petitions, because then if we can help with the citizens before it gets on the warrant, we can make sure we know what they're trying to accomplish and make sure the language does that.
Right. And you and I discussed that, and we didn't change the language. We discussed what it said, and we had the same discussion that we're having right now, but it was a citizen's petition, so we couldn't change it.
Right. What my point now is, if citizens would come forward before they put something on the warrant and get input, they would do everyone a big service, regardless of the topic.
Well, but that being said, then, if that's the truth, if that's the case, if somebody comes with a citizen petition, I mean, is it the policy? Can we allow town council to give them advice?
It depends. I mean, I have towns that once it's on the warrant and they put it on the warrant, we can't touch it. But I have several towns that encourage, if it's like a zoning citizen petition, that they go talk to the planning board about zoning.
So this is before they get signatures and turn it in, but once it's turned in with signatures, you can't change it, right?
We can't.
Right, okay.
And they similarly, all they can do is try to get it passed over, because it's a citizen petition, so one person can't take it off. So
Mike
it's
Goddard?
a policy to ask, people in the town, the select board, the zoning board, whoever might be involved in whatever this petition might be trying to do, and get town council's 2-second read on it. I mean, it happens even not with citizen petitions, where the planning board will want to do something or a zoning board will want to do something, and they'll have language. I'm like, well, what are you trying to do? And I'll look at the language. I'm like, well, that doesn't exactly do this, or we should do A, B, C, or D to make sure it meets your goals. It's just a general statement. But as a rule, most cities and towns end up in this situation where citizens put petitions on and they're stuck with the implications of them, and they're usually less than perfect. That being said, I can't tell you with a good degree of certainty whether I think you would be challenged or not, and whether I think you'd be successful or not. I think it could be defended both ways. And I think you all know me well enough that you've heard me give my opinion when I think something's absolutely dead to wrong in the water, or right to, and no other way to look at something.
Cindy, can I ask just a
If somebody
question?
came with some degree of conviction, on a strictly legal basis, what I think would happen, I would. And in terms of what I believe is a sound policy decision makes the most sense, it's not my role in this.
Okay, Mike
Yeah.
Goddard, you have a comment?
Just question, comment. I just want to bring it back to the execution side, because I think a lot of the discussion was good for go forward, how to do it better, but it's already in. My question would be around implementation, Cindy, is it purely binary, meaning it's either immediate, or is it at the end of respective terms, or could we set an arbitrary target date, meaning maybe the end of this fiscal year, which is actually the end of one person's term, but the other individual, I think, is through 24, which I think letting this go for 2 more years is, then I agree with you. The will of the people is really not being followed, but I think they were trying to thread a needle here, but I think, do we have the option of looking to set a, end of current fiscal year for both positions to be removed, one because their term's up, but the other because we're looking to remove and follow the bylaw.
I think that would be the hardest position to justify because there's really nothing in the language that would suggest you get to choose a third date. But the fact that one person's term is up at the end of the fiscal year is a fact to consider. So one of them will be changed, which changes the balance on the number in a year. But no, I don't think you can put in a third arbitrary date.
Kathy Schofield, you had your hand up. Are you still? What did you?
Yeah, so I had one question for Cindy. When boards submit letters of recommendation or letters of support for from one board to the next between planning, zoning, conservation, does that skip around the idea that they're going to all work and act independently?
First of all, I don't think that's within the scope of the conversation we're having right now. I don't see that as relevant to this bylaw discussion. And so I would caution against having a detailed conversation about that when it's not on an agenda.
Yeah, no, I was just responding to what you had said.
But I mean, in a perfect world, think of a bylaw change, right? Where everyone wants to have a bylaw change. You have the select board working with the developers and coming up with perhaps a development agreement where, okay, we'll support this change, but here's A, B, C, and D that we might find really helpful if we're going to go this route. You may have the zoning board also saying, we think this makes sense for the town or not make sense for the town. You also have, the zoning board doesn't get involved nearly as much because all it really means for them is like, we will have less variances to have to deal with, and it probably makes sense from a zoning perspective to do A, B, C, or D. And conservation is going to look at the project and say, we think either expanding a zoning in this way or not is a good idea or a bad idea. And it's going to depend on whether there are any inherent wetlands concerns or stormwater concerns that are in their province. So I don't think, usually when you have a big, huge project that requires a zoning change, you do want as much input from absolutely all the boards that might have any input on it, and citizens as well. So I don't think that's really relevant to what we're talking about. And so I really would prefer to have that conversation as a separate conversation, but it's not uncommon at all.
Certainly. And one other comment that I wanted to make was that I know this has been kind of mapped out as a personal attack or event as a citizen's petition, but I would ask people to look at the numbers of people who voted in favor of this bylaw change and really get out there and talk to people and find out why they supported it. I mean, I didn't pull all those people in. I felt that the town needed to move in a different direction and that we could make a positive change by, bringing in some new blood, some new ideas, some fresh perspective. And that was really the purpose of the bylaw, was to make sure that we had good representation across several boards that, didn't end up in conflict. And it was nothing personal about it. So that's all I have to say.
Lon, do you have something you want to add?
Yes, please. So my question is, when we're talking about just these specific two boards, but why didn't we include the Board of Health? I mean, they're a board that could potentially be dealing with the same, would 100% be dealing with any property that came in front of planning or zoning, especially when it comes to their septics and their wells. So, we left them off. And if it's really truly about the diversity and about the new perspectives in this flood of people that we have coming in to volunteer in our town, which I either they haven't showed up yet or they're waiting for this shoot a fall, I guess, then we should definitely be looking at this bylaw differently. And I don't even know if it's possible. Maybe it's not to get it on the special town meeting. If we can't, then let's push it to the annual. But we need to go across all boards. If that's truly what it's about, is the diversity and the fresh perspective. We have so many people on multiple boards that touch the same thing, that if we're going to push just these two boards, right, then we should be pushing this across all. Because if that's what it was truly the intent, if it wasn't personal, it was just about the diversity and the fresh perspective, then we need the fresh perspective across all of our boards and committees.
I guess I would be interested I mean, you maybe have a point. I don't know the details, but the Board of Health, maybe that's something that we should look at some point. But I think as far as like other boards, many of them do not make decisions on overlapping. I mean, if there are boards that make decisions on overlapping projects, maybe we should consider them. But I know that it's not the case that there's overlap between all boards. So I don't think it.
Yeah,
I mean, I
and
think you're right. I mean, Lonnie, that like maybe we should consider whether there are other boards where there might be conflicts.
And if we were to do that, we would entertain it as the select board with the with council giving us guidance so that it wouldn't be ambiguous. And we could actually perhaps amend this bylaw that passed by citizens petition so it wasn't ambiguous. So that may be something. It is obviously too late now. The warrant's closed. But we could certainly look to do something with it for the annual.
I also wanted to make another reply to Lonnie about how sometimes it's helpful to get input across boards. And I agree with you. And I think, just like we on the select board have been making efforts to attend other board meetings, board and committee meetings, like I don't think it's inappropriate for planning board members to attend the other meetings and even, voice opinions. But the question is whether they should be able to vote in those meetings. And so that's where I think that the new bylaw is asking that they do not serve on those boards, but they can still contribute to those boards. They still can give valuable perspective on decisions that are being made.
Yeah, and that's a great point. However, now you're going to ask people that aren't a voting member of those boards to now add additional time to go to those meetings to give this input when we can barely get any piece of our of the local residents to come to these meetings to even listen. Look, I've been around this. Hold on, I've been around this a long time. I don't care how many people tell me this isn't personal. The person that brought the citizens petition told me it was personal. So right to my face. So I don't know why this is good. You know what? We have wasted way too much time on this. You guys have the vote. Go ahead and vote it, and let's just move along. I will ask that if the vote is going to go the way, and it seems you guys already have your opinions all made up, if the vote is going to go the way of removing John Vandersloot from the ZBA, don't. Let him resign from the planning board because he would rather do that because he's not going to run again because his age is getting too much and the planning board is way more load than the ZBA. So I would at least ask that you give these people that bit of respect.
So, I mean, is that?
Kathy, you have your hand up. Kathy, are you muted maybe?
Yep, it's me. Mr. Tinio, I hope that the comment you just made about it being personal is not directed at me because that conversation never happened. Is that what you're suggesting?
It was 100% directed at you. It was 100% a conversation that you and I had, that you told me there were too many business people on this on the committees and boards in this town, and you knew what we were all up to.
All right.
Did you not say that?
That's true. Excuse me, but I cannot believe a select board member would sit here and lie in front of the public.
You know you said it, Kathy. Don't you dare.
Cindy, you have a comment?
Yeah, I do have a comment. To what Lonnie said, If the board does go down the path that they want to have immediate removal, I do think you could say that they will be removed from their appointed position unless they come forward within 7 to 10 days or pick a day and, request that they stay on their other position.
My only issue with that is Lonnie himself said we wasted enough time discussing this. It's been 3 meetings now. Both people were given the opportunity and both stated they wouldn't resign. So I'm not sure why they would now turn around and resign. But I just, again, at this point, I want to move the vote. So if
But
somebody
not
has a motion,
Vote, and you wouldn't
They're not,
discuss it again. They
they're
would
not gonna
just- I think you could give, if you make a vote, if you do vote that you are going to apply this bylaw effective now, that they cannot be on both. I think you do not need to have another vote if you also say, and they will be removed from their, whatever their appointed position is, unless they come forward in writing saying that they want to stay in their elected position, or they want to stay on their appointed position and give up their elected position.
Yeah.
And I don't think that costs you any more time.
well, again, all I'll say is that was asked and did not, and they said no before. So
no, it was asked if they were gonna resign from their
Well,
appointed position.
You don't, okay, that you and I aren't together all the time. And I did speak with one of the two personally. All right, and the other one, you're right, I was told that the other one would not resign. But one
I
of them told
spoke
me they
to,
wouldn't resign to either.
I think
I
that's a
spoke to
reasonable
John
accommodation.
Vandersloot, and I'm telling you that he would rather resign from the planning board than resign or be removed from the ZBA.
Okay,
I think that's a reasonable accommodation.
I don't disagree.
Agree.
I think anybody who would like to make a motion should make it now so we can move this.
Do have one other question though, which is about the public hearing process. Can we hear maybe a little bit more about that from Cindy? What are the what is the time frame for that?
The hearing would happen after the vote that we took, right?
Vote before you would even have a possibility.
They- Start over again. The beginning of your statement was muted.
You would need to vote to take a particular action before you'd even have any reason to call a hearing.
Okay, so in other words, if we take a vote tonight, then it would be a matter of somebody doesn't like what happened, the person who was removed could ask for a public hearing.
So they ask for the hearing. So we don't schedule the hearing.
It's up to them. My reading of the statute is the Concom, it's up to them.
Okay.
It's up to the individual or to the Concom?
The individual, I'm sorry.
Okay, and is the individual removed immediately, or is it after the hearing that they're removed?
After the hearing, it wouldn't make sense to require a hearing if they've already been removed.
So if we vote them to be removed, that they would have an opportunity to ask for a hearing before they were actually removed then.
Right, and I would put a time limit on it.
So in other words, we could make a motion and then it would be given, 5 business days or 10 business days to request a hearing to make it effective. And then there would be a hearing that would be publicized, and is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I'd be looking for a motion if someone wants to make one to remove an individual.
Motion that we implement this bylaw prospectively,
Prospectively?
meaning let them finish their terms.
Yes. All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right. I think we've had enough discussion. So all those in favor of allowing the members to finish prospectively and implement the bylaw in that way, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
All right. So it's 2-1 to let them serve prospectively with 1 abstention. So we can move on from there. Thanks.
But you don't have a vote. If you have a 2-2 vote, you don't have.
We don't have a 2-2 vote.
I'm sorry, I thought you said 2 for, 2 against, 1
Nope,
abstent.
we have 2 for, 1 against, and 1 abstains. I'm not voting. I'm the chair. I don't have to, I only can vote to make a tie or break a tie.
Okay.
So we have, so it's 2-1 to allow it, basically, they can serve out their terms. That's
I
what, that's what.
just misheard the vote, that's all.
Right. Right. So it's, just so we're clear, Lonnie and Mike voted to allow them to serve out the rest of their term. Brandon abstained and Elena voted to, in the negative. So it's 2-1 with 1 abstention. And again, I'm the chair, I don't vote. So they're going to serve out their term prospectively. So let's move on to, now the next issue, we currently have 2, well, first let's go to 8B, which is the ADA coordinator, a 1-year reappointment.
I move to make the following 1-year reappointment for a term that will expire June 30th, 2023. Kevin Rudden, ADA coordinator.
Second.
Motion made and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, the next one, we have 2 terms for the Conservation Commission, one that expires in 2024, one that expires in 2025. Now, I had sent an email last evening to the 4 people that indicated they were interested. One of them bounced, so I sent it again this morning. I see 2 of the 4 are here. So what I'm going to ask is that we interview these 2, and then we give the other 2 an opportunity to show up in 2 weeks, and then we can vote to fill these 2 open positions then. So,
Just a question.
sure.
One of these openings is a reappointment, not a. right?
I would, well, I discussed this with town administrator and I think town council at one point. One of them was a reappointment to Tim Icardi. His term expired on June 30th. I'm not sure what the issue was, and Laura, you can confirm this. How many emails did you send asking for a response?
I know I sent at least 1, 2, possibly 3.
So
just
2 or 3 requests, and Tim did send his ethics certificate in September.
Ellen reported.
Which
she
was
got it
no,
September
the other people were late as well. And then in addition to that, he did send an email after our meeting 2 weeks ago asking to be reappointed. But again, so at this point, it could be considered a reappointment. I'm considering it currently, there's 2 open positions. So again, I would, what I want to do is interview both of these 2. And then,
And I would add.
Sure.
Search my email. I did not receive.
All right, why don't you come on up and sit so we can talk? So thanks, Tim. Thanks for coming. So how many years have you been,
I think probably about 16 years.
16 years?
Yep. I've served on FinCom. I've volunteered on numerous boards and helped a lot of things in town move forward. Coach
And you
sports.
served as a building inspector for a while, so you're an employee of the town too, right? So you knew that you needed to respond, right?
I didn't know of a rule that I needed to respond.
So
okay?
you've
I
never
don't have a town-
responded?
I don't have an active town email. I haven't had one since I went out on and had my hip replaced.
Mhm.
So I do not have access to that. I will say that.
You
So,
don't have access.
no.
Lonnie, do you know if he has an active Mendon email address?
He has an active email address. Whether or not he checks it is another thing.
I can't get into it, so.
Okay, well,
I can help you
regardless
get
of what
into it.
happens, you're still involved in other things. If you could make sure, because we have a policy that everybody uses their town email for town business. Simply because if somebody makes a FOIA request, it makes it very easy for World Band and Lonnie of the staff to get that information. Whereas if you're using your town of Bellingham email address or your personal email address, now we have to go searching for it and it's problematic. So that's a policy that's been in place for a while that you need to be using but you're not the only one certainly that has that issue, right? So why don't you explain to us why you want to be appointed to the,
So
to
like,
the,
like I said in my email, I've been a resident for about 22 years. I enjoy volunteering. I enjoy, helping people out, serving my community. I've done it on numerous boards. I've been, like I said, I've been involved and I actually enjoy the Conservation Commission.
Mhm.
We help, the conservation, I don't know if everybody actually knows what the conservation does other than enforce the Wetlands Protection Act. So look, a lot of town residents do projects, you probably do, members of the board. People aren't educated as far as what has to happen with the conservation. It's a learning curve. People come in for a building permit and all of a sudden they have to report to conservation. They're like, what is this? I can't do anything outside without conservation approval. So they have to come in, explain their project. And, for years, our board has been resident friendly to help them move their projects along. We've helped so many people in this town there's different ways you can file an order of conditions if you're working in your yard and you have a wetland and you're working within the buffer zone, you would have to file an order of conditions. Depending on the project that you're doing, we advertise it and we have the resident come in and explain what they're doing. If they're doing a project that's really not intrusive to the wetland, we have the discretion to let the people move forward with their project as long as they do certain things that protect the resource areas. So we're pro-resident. We help the residents along. Like I said, you have no idea unless you come in and you're trying to do a project and you think you're going to do your project right away. And then you say, all of a sudden you get a stop sign. You can't do that until you go through the process. So, over the years, we've helped, we've moved projects along for residents. When developers come in, if they're in the resource area or if they're deciding like the project that you were previously talking about, the first thing they do is they come in and they determine what area they can actually develop. So they go to the Conservation Board first. So these are the boards where the people are discussing, interaction between the boards, the previous conversation. Look, the conservation decides first, then they move forward and design their project. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I know the town voted on this bylaw, but in my opinion, the people have elected certain people on these elected boards. Why would you want to take off people that were elected by the majority of the town to help the other? They know the projects that are being in front of the board, so it's helpful.
well,
Multiple boards, okay?
and I'll just say that you're asking a question and we're kind of getting off track
And I
here.
get that, but I'm just trying to tell you how these boards interact.
Yeah, well, I'm answering your question. The reason is because the majority of the people thought that there was a
And I
that
said
there was a
that. I
conflict.
agree.
Okay,
I agree.
so
look,
why do you want to continue?
I enjoy doing it.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Why the Concom? There's many places you could volunteer.
So, you want to know why the Concom? So,
Yes.
okay, so about 18 years ago, okay?
Yeah.
I was doing a project in Hopkinton. And I was in front of the Conservation Board and I was building on the lake in Hopkinton. And it took me probably about 8 months to build one house on this. It was within a buffer zone. And it was because the board was, it was made up and it was, it was pretty corrupt. That's what I'm gonna say. It was corrupt. It took me 8 months to get this project through. The day I got it through, I had to have my attorney there, my engineer, a land surveyor, and a wetland specialist. Finally got the thing approved. I left that meeting with an approved order of conditions. I came home exhausted. I sat on my couch. The TV comes on and says, volunteer in your town. We're looking for conservation members and different board members. And I sent an email and I asked to be, placed on the board or consideration to serve on the board, just because I would never do that to anybody. What they did to me. That was why I did it. And that's, to be perfectly honest with you. And, there's several members on our board that have been on for a long time, and we do nothing but help residents with their projects. and educate them as to, you know, what you have to do and ways that you can do it in, you know, without damaging anything. And they appreciate it. You know, there's hundreds and hundreds of them. So I enjoy it.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. Bob Sweet, I know you've been here to multiple meetings about this. Do you want to come up and just speak to us briefly?
Bob Sweet, 50 Milford Street. Conservation has been something that I've been paying attention to for 20 years now. I've learned a lot. The board has taught me a lot. My work has came to a point in my life where I have more time. I'm not working out of town. And it's time to give back to the town. The town's been very good to me. They've allowed me all of the fruits of the labors that I have. I have a beautiful place. I want to give back to the town.
Anybody have any questions for him?
I have to ask them both the same question, right? Like, why Concom and not another board or committee?
I'm more familiar with it. Like I said, for the last 20 years, I've been going to the meetings, learning from the board, what is acceptable, what isn't, talking with DEP about stormwater management, talking to them about wetland resource areas, talking to botanists about what plants are acceptable wetland plants, what plants are not.
Right.
So I have a wider range of knowledge for that position as opposed to any other.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so at this point, what I'm going to do is thank you very much. Again, we have two others, but they didn't even have 24 hours notice about this meeting. So I'm going to put it on for the next meeting, and then we'll interview those two if they show up, and then we'll appoint these two open positions.
Yeah, just a question. You know, previously, when I previously served on the board, we took a lot of input from the committee itself in terms of, because they've all got to work together. So they usually came to us with recommendations.
Right.
So has that happened?
Yes. Yeah, they recommended
any of the four?
they recommended these two gentlemen,
Okay.
Tim Icardi for reappointment, and Bob Sweet would be fine. But after that happened, that was that was potentially when somebody could have been removed. They said either one of these would be fine, but then we had somebody resign. It's been just 45 days, and we've had two other people who have come forward.
And has the Concom had a chance to meet with those candidates as well?
Yeah, Carl has his hand up. We actually had one other person who volunteered previously, but they were specifically interested in serving out the term of the person if they had been removed. But that no longer applies because we decided to just allow them to serve out their term. But Carl, you have your hand up again. I don't know if you're muted. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to correct a statement of fact. We did not make a statement about Tim McCarty and whether he should be reappointed. I will add that to tomorrow evening's agenda. We did talk about the letter I sent talked about two other people because at the time we were not considering that Tim McCarty's position needed to be discussed by the selectmen.
Right,
So
but you did send me an email that stated that he should be reappointed, right?
That was the Conservation Commission has not discussed Tim McCarty's being reappointed. I will ask him to recuse himself, and the remaining members will discuss that at tomorrow evening's meeting.
All right.
We did send you a letter on 2 out of the other 4 people who had expressed an interest.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I know one of the emails you'd sent me talked about Tim continuing to serve, after his appointment expired, and it was a very nice email about. I thought that was one where you had recommended, but what you're telling me is it wasn't the whole vote that voted. The whole board didn't vote.
It's not even. Yes, the Conservation Commission will discuss that at tomorrow's meeting.
Right.
I mean, the spirit more, Carl, from my perspective is in the past, we've generally taken the committee who is looking to add members. Your opinion carries some weight with the board from my past experience. So I'd just be curious as to if you have a rank order after you meet with all the candidates, you know, where does that lie?
And if you have an opportunity, after this meeting, I'll forward to you the other two if you don't have them. And
I
maybe you
believe,
can,
yes, I'll check, but I'm pretty sure they're the same two that I reached out to and did not hear from as well. But yes, I'll take that under as well.
there might be one that you did, one that changed, but
Okay.
I'll do that. I'll do that. Okay? All right. Thank you very much. All right, let's, at this point, we're going over the ZBA number D because, you know, we already voted to keep it perspective. So now we're going to go to finalize and approve the STM warrant.
So before we start going through the warrant, let's start with the financials, because I really think that that helps sort of shape the articles that are for consideration, or at least should be known as we're starting to think about what is moving forward to the STM. At this point, I just had multiple conversations with the town accountant just this afternoon. It's, you know, it's an unusual fiscal year because of costs related to the pandemic and then delays in receiving revenues. So we have an unusually low free cash number coming in for this fall, which right now we're safely estimating at $150,000. Okay, that's not typical. You know, there's a number of factors and we'll analyze that more in detail, but for the terms of our conversations here tonight about guiding what we're looking at, you know, that 150 is the safe, you know, if it comes in slightly higher than that, great, but 150 is the number that I confirmed with him that we're comfortable with a little bit. We talked about before, we have $84,000 in excess levy. And then, so the second page of funding shows you what available funds that we have and what particular locations available to us to potentially fund any of these articles if they need funding, the ones that do. These are usually, to the new members, these are the sources that we use for a different article. So I'll just, from the bottom, just quickly. So FinCom reserve, we don't typically use at an SPM or an ATM. The use of FinCom reserve is supposed to be for emergencies, and it requires a vote of both boards, and it's sort of, you know, if something goes wrong during the year, that's what we use. If it's still in reserve towards the second half of the year, then we're a little more, when we know a little bit better, we'll use it for things, but we usually hold that steady there. Reserve for negotiations, we budget some portion of every year because we are typically either in the middle of some sort of contract negotiation with someone, or we have changes in hiring or positions or recruitment that require something. Free cash, we just talked about. There are other smaller funds. There's a land bank, there's OPEB, there's an ambulance reserve. The excess level we talked about, which is the excess room we have, right? Taxes from growth. We have the money from the 350th, which is the transfer, we're transferring from dispatch. And then we have stabilization, CapEx, and then the CPC funds. One of the pages in there is that long-range financial plan and the target. And I know we've talked about this before. You know, you've heard my speech about using stabilization. I'll say it again, which is targets are low, but that's what they are. 5% of the operating budget for stabilization, 3% for CapEx. Last year, we finally hit that target for stabilization. Right now, we're just slightly over by a couple $1,000s. In CapEx, we are way underfunded. And that is primarily because one, we use it, need it, and two, there is a cap we talked about that's $150,000 that has prevented us from putting more in at the time. And we'll look at that. Suggest we look at it in May.
Yeah, I just want to make the stabilization, I mean, all that long range stuff, those were floors, not ceilings in terms of targets. Yeah, okay, all right,
100%.
yeah.
And so what I always say, I mean, I think they are dangerously low. And I say that to people a lot of times. I mean, we're not trying to say the sky is falling, but we are a town. If you think that our savings account is only $1.1 million for a town, that should be pretty shocking to people when they hear that number, when you think about the town itself. Our budget is 22 million. So, you know, preferably we have something much higher than that in savings. But so we've been very good the last couple of years, at least the last 9 years, in a couple of years right before me, working towards building those up. There were times when there was nothing in here. Nothing. So this is, it's great that we've hit this target, but we're certainly, it's cautious use and stabilization or CapEx, 2/3 votes on the floor. Okay? So that's my pitch about where the money comes from. So in terms of the articles, I'm just going to go through them quickly. We can.
Let me just stop.
Yep.
I know that there are a number of these we want to put on a consent calendar, which means that we would move them quickly as a group, right?
Potentially, yes. I think if we we love to do a consent calendar, especially in May for the ones that we do annually.
Which we always do.
Yes, and my hope is that we, I think this warrant's about to drop by a number of articles, and so I think, hopefully we won't need consent, but we'll see. So, bills of a prior year, just for a little, we haven't talked, just gonna say this, we should invite the FinCom to our next meeting to review these together
Sure.
and tell them, because they ultimately need to recommend a funding source. And so I think we want to have a joint meeting, and then I'll also let them set their own meeting. So bills of a prior year, I won't get into the minutia where everything is on here, but it's a small amount.
So do you have numbers right now?
I do. They're in the spreadsheet. I handed to you.
Would it be most helpful for me to keep the spreadsheet up or the warrant articles?
The warrant articles, because these numbers do change.
Well, these are all, it's in the SharePoint. You should be
Yeah.
able to pull it up
No,
on.
we
your-
all have it. I mean, because that's always the tricky part, which is when people see numbers change, they say, how did you not know?
Sure.
2 weeks ago, but that's the nature of what we do, right? Bills of a prior year, very small amount, right? Excess leverage for those potentially, or free cash. Those are both good sources there. For the salaries, you can see the detail here. In terms of trying to consolidate articles on the warrant for Article 2, there's a number of things in here. The COLAs that we gave last year, both chiefs need some additional funding for overtime. And we've had, as you'll recall, Chief Kessler said tonight, we've had a number of positions turn over. And every time one of those positions turns over in any department, we typically have an amount that we need to pay out in benefits that they have accrued. So there's some funding in there for each of those, and I have the individual breakdowns for each individual person, but I will not talk about it.
When were negotiations finalized for these? The 2%, the COLAs and things like that?
So these were all, everyone's in a 3-year contract now. There's one more year on a contract. These 2% COLAs.
Okay.
So I budgeted 2% in the budget, but when the board gave the additional 2% at the end of last year for pandemic, the board voted in May to provide an additional 2% to all employees, so that everyone received 4% in May.
So outside of the budget planning process?
Correct. And the budget at that point already been approved with the 2% that I had planned.
More the timing is what I want to understand, like if. I'm
Right.
good. Yeah,
So
right.
we were able to utilize funding at the end of last year, which is again, another reason why we would have less free cash, right? To pay for portions of the raises for last year. And then this is the portion that I need in order to meet the salary lines for this year.
But these two, this isn't, this funding is for the 2 elected people, right?
They're in here.
Yeah.
So this funding is for everyone. This is for every employee, every contractual employee, every part-time employee, any position that we had budgeted that received that 2% bump. That's what that is here. We also have, as I said, the payouts for if we had any areas where, let's say, we need someone that cashed out with $6,000 worth of time, right? We need to supplement that back into a salary line.
I just want to clarify, it's a 2% bump on top of a negotiated.
It was additional 2% at the end of the year because of inflation and a decision that the board made. Yeah.
Yes, so for everyone, it basically ends up being 242 now. Then, like I said, there's also the payouts for those in the larger departments. You can see in our numbers. In highway, we have an article on further down the warrant about the additional funding that's needed for the CDLs. I don't think we need a separate article for that, which is it's going in those lines anyway, so I can put it here. So there's an additional $10,000 in there for the two CDLs in that line. All the individual calculations, the rest of the COLAs until you get to the fire chief. I think it's important to note this because it's on here twice. We do have a shared agreement, as you know. We will be reimbursed for a large portion of this from Blackstone. I actually had a resident come to me today to ask about this. And so this, I just need to create the room in the line in order to pay him out, and then we'll be reimbursed later. There is no direct correlation between it coming in and out. And so,
Just a question on the CDLs. This,
yes,
Alan can front run his budget to make sure those licenses get moving.
correct.
Okay.
We did have a meeting
It's
with the
already-
union this past week. I will be bringing you something at our next meeting specifically about CDLs that we can talk about in executive session, then hopefully sign off on. That will put us in a good position until 2024 when the contract is up. So so you can see right there that that's $143,000. Okay. So in order to fund that, obviously, we want to use as much excess levy as we can, because that is an annual operating cost, right, that will come back. Reserve for negotiations, that's a perfect fit for that because it's related to the hiring and different types of costs. And then this other $30,000, the source here is free cash. I would say to you, one other area potentially, but so early in the year for me to say, is we could look at transferring from employee benefits, because I know it's very early in the year for me to say it, but when these positions do turn over, we frequently do have changes in coverages and things like that that can create some excess funding. So just.
But we can't plan on.
But we could that's more of
We
a
can-
lever we can pull later.
Yeah, later.
Exactly. So
That's
I'm
later.
saying if we came down to a scenario here in which you decided that you felt too nervous to spend all of the free cash, I know of some other options to consider for other areas that might give us a little more room to breathe. So obviously, that's Article 1, Article 2. Article 3, 4, and 5, stabilization, CapEx, and OPEB. I would recommend we pull those because we don't have funds at this point. If something were to change, obviously, we could revisit it at the ATM. We've done that in previous years, which is we didn't allocate everything and we did it in May. It's possible. Article 6 is $1,500. I put down free cash for that. The separate article here for the fire chief is because transferring from dispatch, as I mentioned when we were doing the agreement, I thought that we could utilize some of the funding from dispatch in order to help subsidize the costs for our end. So I need to move that money into the line. That's pretty straightforward. The planning grants are 2 grants. One is a grant that the planning board got, and this is a match. And the other one is the IMA agreement that we have with the town planners. So that I'm being as creative as I can with the numbers around this planning grant. Because I do think there's another possibility here. This is another opportunity. I've been thinking a lot lately, and it's more of a staffing decision, but we need 20 for one grant, and I need the other 35 for planning. But I've been thinking about utilizing some of the funding around zoning enforcement, potentially too, related to the position when it comes on. What we will get with this grant, and if I just need to say it again, it's 3 towns, us, Millville, and Uxbridge. And the idea is you hire a full-time junior planner that the 3 towns share, and then you hire a senior planner as the advisor to help train the junior planner, basically, mentor them for a couple of years. The state paid for the entirety of it for the first year. This is the second year, so this is our portion. I anticipate, and I'm going to bring to you next meeting, a new IMA that basically covers the next 2 years, which would still be in our second year, but it's an updated IMA because originally the position was supposed to be in Uxbridge. Then here, it's more of that. So I do anticipate that the amount goes up for the next couple of years and then it drops back down again once the senior advisor, though not that we ever wanted to go, but we certainly appreciate his service. But like I said, I do think there are a couple of other areas. This is another one in which I could look at potentially if we wanted to maybe, you know, utilize some internal efficiencies to create. Library hours, I wrote down here in the notes, there was a request that had different numbers. The total amount that I put to the side here is 19,425, which seems to be funding from late November until the end of the fiscal year. I have no recommendation on that. That's for you to discuss amongst yourselves. For the senior center, I had originally put this on as a placeholder.
Yeah, of course. So let's go back to, let's talk about 9 first, library hours.
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts on that. One, I think that it's, as it's presented, I thought it was closer to 30, honestly, the number that I saw. And that had to do with the 20,000 because we're converting something to full-time. So I look at this and that's basically, we're encumbering money for next year's budget straight up, because this is not a one-time, this is perpetual, this is operating budget. So that should be ATM budget process.
Right.
And secondarily, when I looked at some of the information that was provided, I got some questions because, and maybe I should go to Andrew with this, with my question.
I think Andrew's on the call.
So I just looked at it in terms of the idea that expanding 8 hours. Yeah. I'm not sure. I looked at that. This seems to be more of an access question versus a volume question.
Sure.
So I think it's more scheduling I would look at. And it looks like we're, switching Thursday.
Andrew, are you, I know you,
Yes.
oh, there you are.
Oh, yeah, hello.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, it's not a question. I was just looking at some of the information you sent over. I just want to, there might be some more work we need to do to understand that, because I think some of the acts at 8 hours, I'm wondering are we looking at another part-time? For 8 additional hours to look at the cost, it surprised me.
No, it's not. It's so essentially it's to fund 10 additional hours, 5 for the children's librarian, and then 5 for current existing staff. We're not looking to add staff. Because we have 2 desks, we have to make sure that we have both of those covered at any given time. So what we're able to do, and this is even just by combination of being able to, or myself being able to be on the desk at certain times, what we're able to do is to take those 10 hours and it would then convert that into 8 additional open hours. But it's not looking to fund additional staff. This is for our current staff alone.
But by doing it the way you're doing it, Andrew, you are actually increasing FTE costs quite a bit that's what I'm saying is it looks like access will be more of a scheduling thing than necessarily creating a full-time employee, things like that. And I also think that some of the program numbers that you sent indicate a decrease in usage, not an increase in usage over the years. I mean, it started low, went high, it's coming back down a little bit. So, I mean, I just think I would say we want to be a little more targeted with understanding when the programs are run, what days.
I'm not sure that programs is necessarily the
the attendance figures you sent
indicator
over
to work with. It's more so about increasing access. It's not necessarily about trying to create a situation for us to accommodate programs. We're able to accommodate programs.
So Andrew, I misspoke. It was attendance. It's the numbers you sent over to me. That indicates a decrease, right, in terms of traffic.
Well, I mean, if you're looking at the last couple of years, you're talking about the pandemic, so that that obviously cut into things somewhat. I would say in the last full year that we had before the pandemic, FY19, we were up to 41,977 in attendance, which was our highest attendance number. So we were increasing prior to the pandemic.
We can have that. I mean, I'd love to look at the numbers again, because I think what I'd wanted to understand is usage in terms of timing of attendance, because I see Monday going from closed to open, but Thursday is now closed. I'm not sure. When I look at some of the recommendations, I say to myself, wow, that must be driven by something, but I don't see the data that demonstrates why that's being done. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, it's difficult if you're asking me like to pinpoint. I mean, this is more sort of anecdotal. We don't necessarily take attendance statistics, for each individual day of the week. I can go anecdotally on the fact that Mondays typically were our strongest day when we were open on Mondays, which was obviously over 10 years ago at this point. But, you know, if you're asking for statistics specific to specific days, that's not something that I could provide for you. We use door counters. And so, you know, if you're talking about just general building attendance, that would be something that would be difficult to extrapolate. You know, program attendance programs are based around the days that we typically have them. Often those are in the middle of the week, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. But the Thursday, we just have one program in the morning. So Thursday is not necessarily a day that I would think that we would need to hold on to if we were to do Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays, the lion's share of our programming.
Yeah.
Like I said, this is more so about access than it is about you know, providing more hours open for programs.
Understood. I would probably say, I was just looking at your attendance figures year over year, things like that, and I excluded the COVID, the pandemic year completely from my analysis.
But normalized, so attendance versus hours per week. I mean, the workload's
Want to make sure
significantly higher
I'm
now
on the
than
same
it was
page.
in 2010.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding. What was that?
Sorry, I was just pointing out that if you normalize essentially the attendance versus the open hours per week, it's substantially higher now than it was when you were open in fiscal year 2010 at 57.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
just,
you're talking almost double the hours in 2010. We're getting done the attendance and program attendance on literally half of the hours that we used to have.
yeah, and that, I mean.
But I wouldn't compare it to the 57 hours. I'm looking at the 30 hours when you're looking at 30
You know,
hours.
and it's good for us to be discussing this now, but I mean, the bottom line is that both Articles 9 and 10, the library hours and the senior center, we simply don't have the free cash to do that now. It's good to discuss it because we're moving forward to the budget
Well,
discussion.
can I ask a quick question? My understanding is free cash is probably not the best area to pull it from.
Yeah,
I know that there's excess levy limit, and my understanding is that's about $118,000, which is intended for recurring costs such as this. I mean, I think what we're proposing seems a perfect opportunity to use some of that amount going forward. I know that there were some things earmarked. I cannot see the spreadsheet from where I am, so it's difficult to say where that's been devoted.
We traditionally, we do things with excess levy, with the levy limits, things like ice and snow, public safety, things that we don't have any other choice. And I would, that doesn't to diminish the library. It's something that needs to go through the budget process. So we're going to have to push this. We're going to have to push both of these, the senior center and the library, into the budget process to make that decision at the ATM.
So you're speaking of in the spring?
Yes, correct.
I see.
I think ideally, right? So the request last year for the budget was like $31,000. The problem the library is up against, and it's a request every year and it's a valid request, is that the benefits costs skyrocket the request because he's at that breaking point, which is in order to make that position become full-time, it increases the cost. We've looked at a number of different ways to do it. Unfortunately, the timing never seems to work out exactly, but something like this, it was one of the budget requests, couldn't be funded at the time, wasn't selected as a priority. We said that we'd review it in the fall. Unfortunately, we don't have the funding in the fall, but we obviously should include it again in our budget for this year and consider it against the other priorities.
Why is the objective to make the position full-time? To increase access?
Well, in the past, that has been the
right.
Rather than hiring,
the focus here is
access, not increasing full-time employees. Right.
Potentially,
Right,
yes,
right,
right.
okay.
And so I think it's unfortunate, but much like every other, budget year, I mean, it's, public safety is a priority, but, this has been back for at least 6 years out of my 9. So I think hopefully this budget cycle, we can take a look at it.
I would really like to see that.
Andrew, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so, you know, and perhaps it's in the way I presented it. I mean, it clearly, if you look at attendance figures, the attendance figures broken out between children's and adults, you'll see that much of the attendance is children's. That's almost entirely due to Tara Windsor, who is our children's librarian. So, you know, clearly we do want to have somebody else in a full-time position here. I'm the only individual that's full-time at the library. It makes it very difficult. When I'm not there, she is second in command. I could speak, you know, for hours on what she brings to us and the value that she has for us at the library. And so clearly, you know, yes, we want increased access, but we also want the ability to have her helm that children's department in the way in which she can and not be sort of run ragged in doing it in the 19 hours that she does. I don't even know exactly how she's able to do that within 19 hours. So, you know, if that was not something that was particularly stressed in the documentation I sent you, my apologies. This is a twofold situation where we're looking for access and we're looking to have somebody else other than myself be full-time at the library. Of course, full-time is, you know, anything over 19. Unfortunately, you know, that's only 5 hours. I would like it to be more than that, but, you know, I'm understanding where budgets are at and that sort of thing. This is the, you know, the direction we wanted to go in. We feel it's important that she be one who benefits from these additional hours. Not that it's not important for the library staff in general to be receiving more library hours. Most of them are averaging 10 or 11 a week. It's very difficult to do this job with an entirely part-time staff and one full-time individual. We're just trying to come up with a solution that is amenable and workable for us. And having Tara be an additional, being a full-time employee allows us some leeway, some ability to do some things that we're not able to do currently. I hope that explains it.
We have one other person with a hand, at least one other with a hand up I see in the.
Hi. Hi. Gabrielle Porcello, 38 Bellingham Street. I'm also a library trustee. I just kind of want to reiterate, I know, Kim, you did mention this, but we were told back in the spring that this would be revisited in the fall, and we feel like this keeps happening to us. So again, to Andrew's point, the children's librarian is working 19 hours a week and really is doing much more than that, I'm sure, you know, over and above, because if you saw the amount of work that she does putting together the programming and things like that, it definitely takes more than the 19 hours that she actually is getting paid for. And then it also would be very important for another full-time person to be at the library, like Andrew said, so that, because Tara is the second in command, basically, when Andrew is not there to run the staff in the library. So again, we would appreciate the consideration to, you know, keep this. We were told that there was going to be money available in the fall. So any consideration would be appreciated.
Go ahead.
So I have a quick comment. I've got a little bit of a unique perspective here because my wife is actually a librarian and has worked at several libraries. I also have small children. In fact, I attended one of the story times this morning with my daughter. So I really hear where you're coming from. And it's amazing the amount of programs that Tara is able to do with the hours that she's given. I am very familiar with this because my wife works in the industry. She does more programming than a lot of full-time librarians do, and it's really appreciated. And I would really like to see the on this, because I know as a parent of small kids, I would appreciate additional access as well.
Hearing 3 days after the town.
Just wanted to get that on the record. This is something that I really support.
I have a question also. So the article is about increasing the library 8 additional hours, but then this involves increasing the hours for it includes making the children's librarian position full-time
Full-time.
and then, but also adding hours to other staff. Is that correct? So is there like a breakdown of how much?
Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, so, so there's, actually, is this Elena?
Yes, sorry.
Did you receive the document that I had sent out yesterday?
I may have missed that one, but I can look for it now.
Okay, so the document lays out the split of hours, which includes, 5 hours additional for the children's librarian and 5 hours additional for library staff. And then it gives a potential schedule that could be adhered to if we were to receive those hours. So it is 5 additional work hours for the library assistants, 5 additional hours for the children's librarian. And like, as they have said, the line, the large part of this is the benefits piece. Outside of the benefits piece, you're looking at, $10,000.
Yeah, I'm not sure I got this email.
If I don't know if Mike or someone could forward the documents to her, or I can certainly do that tomorrow.
I'm looking at the one that has the hours per week and adults in attendance. You're
Right.
saying there was a second one you sent that had the breakdown?
No, well, I mean, are you speaking of the breakdown for the cost for the increased hours?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is, I sent that along. There were 2 documents, one of which was for increased hours cost. There were 4 scenarios laid out.
Yeah, I can share it on the screen right now.
Okay.
This is. I voted it from.
And this is several, this is, where's this dated? It's at least a couple weeks old, so.
I mean, I initially sent it out at the end of September, actually the day after I met the first time when you were first looking at the articles for the warrant.
Yeah, so that's what I'm sharing on my screen now, if you can confirm. It's correct.
Yeah. I mean, I know that Kim can attest to the fact that we've talked back and forth in the past about how hours would be, allocated. And, there are the one obviously that works for us just in terms of what we need is this particular scenario. Obviously the 4 scenarios here are for partial year beginning, in November. And then obviously there are FY24 scenarios as well listed.
Lena, I think I just sent it that one with the spreadsheet, right? I could just emailed it to you.
Thank you. Okay.
So you can look at it on your own screen instead of.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't quite focus on the big screen.
I was just looking to confirm that excess levy number, and I can't find the email, so I'll circle back, and that would be great if it were true.
Was this the one that,
I just we'll sort it tomorrow.
this is the one that,
But I've had 84 this whole time. So, okay, next. So we already talked about the senior center for a minute. So I know the board had talked about really prioritizing the senior center for debt exclusion or for whatever for May. So I'm not sure actually, even if there is a study or anything at this point that we really need to do around the senior center. So I think in terms of funding for this piece, I don't think there's anything that we need to do right now. I think we could wait and we can have the conversations with the COA and with Amy and figure out a strategy for May and see if there's additional things we need outside of just considering debt exclusion for the design that they have. 350th, this is the transfer we talked about and to move into an events account so that we can use it for future events. Article 12 is, I have that.
You do.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. That's, Article 12 is what we've talked a little bit before about the ADA issues around the elevator in the town hall and the rear exit and the alcove space. And we've had some meetings on it. I had a contractor walk through. I've had, a design person walk through, and I've had a couple of contractors actually look at it now since they were here to look at the other space. And it's become really apparent that it's a large project that will involve an architect and engineers and, strategy around funding, depending on because it could potentially involve, right, recreation of an exit with external changes to the building on that side, plus adaptation of the elevator, plus that space down there. So this funding, and I just sent an email to CPA today, I think we could possibly pay for a portion of the study with CPA funds, if not all of it. So the funding piece on that will come around, but the estimate that I've gotten from 2 contractors this week about what a study like that costs is $20,000 to $25,000. So that is here. Timing wise, I would say in order to really stay on track, or to do the additional ATM article I was talking about from May to fund the rest or to utilize what's left from the campus project. We doing the study now really is advantageous in order to stay on that schedule. And so I do think it's a priority for this meeting rather than waiting till May. Keep it going.
Anybody have any questions about that? Okay.
Milford, that's just a transactional thing. We talked about this before, the ability to sell that.
It's not
parcel,
money,
that's-
right? It's not money.
Yeah, that's well, I try to put anything that has a financial connotation and then take them out. Tree warden, we talked about this before. So we have funding available, it's possible. My recommendation here, because I think he's doing a new job and he's new to the job, that we should absolutely reinstate the amount of funding that he already lost due to that bill of a prior year. But I think we could consider possibly giving him some of this request rather than all of this request, because as he figures out the lay of the land better about prioritizing what can actually get done, because tree work in particular is something that really could fall under that emergency sort of piece that FinCom Reserve would be good for if an issue came up. So, I mean, it's really discretionary, I think, about how much you want to fund here. But I do think there are a couple of other options if a situation did arise outside of the tree work he wants to conduct for.
Mr. Goddard, I know you asked some follow-up questions to Mr. Steves during the last meeting about recommendations,
Yeah.
or did you get any follow-up on that?
No, I was looking at this and I agree. I think 12,000 should absolutely reinstate for the bills, but I think I'd be more comfortable allocating money to the account if we knew where the work was being done. And I think that was the conversation we had. I would not be against parking some money to be made available, but I also think it's incumbent upon us to understand what work is being planned to be done that requires, the additional funding from what we already voted on
Right.
from a budget standpoint. Even if you leave it in free cash, as an example.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if we need to get it from FinCom reserves for an emergency, we need to reinstate FinCom reserves, but without some sense of, we're going down Blackstone because we see this section of street and I've got an estimate that it's going to be this, it wasn't planned for. That's one question, but not having, well, I think I've said my piece.
Right.
I'll stop talking now.
So any number recommendation, 12 plus 10, just the 12. And
What was the bill of a prior year that was taken out?
it was 12.
That was 12.
That makes him whole.
Right.
Based on the
To
budget.
to me, I think just because of the emergency piece of the rest of it, I think you just do the 12.
And I did and so just so you know, when I met with him, I did tell him the probability of funding for this particular thing and stated probably exactly this, which is very likely that that money would be returned to his budget because it makes the most sense. But because of the complexity and of how we prioritize and fund, he might not get an additional request. And then I explained to him the other areas in case of problems further, because like I said, once we get to April, we can transfer then too. So you're really talking about getting from, November to April, right? And if something were to come up, I mean, it's difficult from a planning standpoint, I get for him, but he did just get here. So I think.
Well, I'm assuming he didn't plan the budget, but I'm also assuming there's money in the budget today. It's not like it's zero.
Right, absolutely.
Right.
Right, and so I think he can still start to make a plan and think about how, I think he's certainly capable and seems like he's can put something together and really make a couple
But
of larger
I
plan.
think I had a conversation with him, but how much is he burned up in his budget so far? Because if you think about the way the process does this, they do it in the fall and it pretty much stops except emergencies in the wintertime. And of course, when previously, the previous tree warden was also the highway surveyor. So there was some overlap there about what did which, which we don't have that. I mean, they still cooperate, right? But do you know what's left?
I don't have a current, it's October. So I can take a look and see. I don't think it's, like I said, I think the issue at the time was, I think he's very eager to get started. I think he's going to do a good job. I think he'd like to have it fully funded so he could execute a plan that he thinks that he needs. But I think we can have more conversations to sort of plan together.
But yeah, and I think you said the key word, the plan that he needs, but I haven't seen a plan.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's.
That's because he's still trying to figure out.
Sure,
I mean, it was based on what was left to him. And I'm just trying to go back into the,
I can tell you what the tree board's budget is.
yeah, what,
for the
right.
year.
Yes, what was it for the year? That's what I'm trying to.
It's, he gets a salary of $3,500 and he has $45,000 in expenses.
Yes, and out of that 45, that 12 was right off the top.
Right, and so he's got, 33,000 in there annually for contractual services related to, tree cutting, plus another 7 for contractual. So he's really got $40,000 in any given year specifically for contractual services related to tree
Now,
cutting.
does that include his, if he has a police detail?
So,
That was where the overlap came in, I
So,
think.
well, I think that needs to be examined a little bit further. I got some differing responses when I asked further about where it was being paid from exactly. What I was told is that it's been paid through the tree warden's budget solely in the past. But
So I would say this, if we were to go, a couple things. One, I think quarterly financial reviews should be reinstated in our meetings, because I think that we're at the end of, you said it's October, but we've gone through a quarter of the fiscal year. We should probably, side note there. But the other thing I was thinking about is, why don't we go back and look at the actuals for the past 3 to 5 years out of that budget? Let's see how much contractual work we actually expended, regardless. I mean, the details would be a variable amount.
Very difficult to.
But if we looked at the actuals on the tree warden expenses and it's running high from where he is now.
What I would want to see, which we may not be able to look at, is what the number was at different times during the year.
Right.
There's
He's
also
got to front run it though, don't you
There's
think?
also a huge die
Yeah.
off of trees going on right now. That's kind of.
Right.
So I agree.
Right.
In the gypsy moths and the elm borer beetles.
Yeah, I know that for.
So I would say this, we certainly look at the budgets during the budget process, right, to make sure they're adequately funded. My question mark about, is it enough or not? Really it's more than looking at the tree warden's budget. It's looking to make sure any larger invoices related to this weren't charged into a different budget at some point and
That's my-
subsidized. And that's the part that needs a little bit further examination, including the detail part. That's,
But that should be, those invoices should be readily available, right?
Right.
You should understand which accounts they were debited to or credited to.
Well, the issue is going back to see which account and invoice was debited to.
Right.
Um,
I mean, that's,
Should be in KDS, right?
so, right, so in terms of that, so the only reason we wouldn't have a quarterly report, and I can't bring it up right now on KBS, is because we're in our brand new financial system and I can't access it like that, like right now.
That's fine.
But, right, what I would have to do, which I normally do, is when I'm looking at the budgets, when I do, I look for anything that's a, variable that sticks out, that's a large expense that doesn't belong there, right? And so that's just, I need to take a look at that to know, like, I don't feel comfortable recommending funding this entirely, and I'm not saying we
So
don't,
as-
but that's not an area.
So just to keep focus on the process, what we're doing tonight is to determine which articles are staying, which articles are going, and then we still have to have a review with FinCom.
FinCom.
So I think we talked enough about this that we know it's a number, but not this
So
number.
I'll
Yeah.
put 12 there for now.
Yes.
Okay, CapEx.
You had me bumping up. I just want to say that right now. I was, my number had already gone up in my head based on.
Well, I'm not saying it hasn't either, but I just don't,
Yeah.
you know,
Right. Because, these numbers can certainly change. These are our recommendations, right? And so they are subject to change. Article 15 is that cap on CapEx. We talked about this before, probably belongs in May. That's.
Yes.
Suggest we should pull it.
Yes.
And
That's not,
then-
that's not a money thing. That's
it's not a money
policy
thing. That's a policy issue.
Like I said,
that-
I keep anything financial here
Yeah.
that might be, because this eventually goes to the FinCom, right? And then we talk about them. Same with the parks facility study. Not quite sure at this point in terms of priorities. That's up to you to determine if this is something you would want to entertain. If we were considering something, my recommendation for a funding source would be stabilization places. But again,
let's move that one to the ATM as well.
but I wasn't here. You said Parks came and gave a presentation, right?
He talked about it, right? Yes.
Was there a specific dollar amount involved? I did have a chance to talk to Dan about it today.
No, I mean, that's the whole point is, I don't know if he's on here or not, but at the time, they were still figuring that out.
Okay.
One thing I'd say is some of these studies, we're talking relatively small dollars. Like, what do you think this would be?
I just, this was a proposal to redo the entire beachfront.
So
Right, I thought that was done.
So the beach front proposal was annual town meeting.
Right.
What I would suggest we look at here, we talked at the time because they had come to ask for consideration of the facility and they had said potentially.
This is I'm sorry, this is the building, right?
250 or
And-
something, they were gonna look at a number.
See, and just as an aside, while we're talking about this, we went back and discussed the Trask property. Remember off of Trask Road? And there is it was the Lowell's, the Lowell farmhouse. There is a newer barn building that exists that has some more
Storage
updated, yeah.
Potential.
Yes, and actually the day that I went up there with the chief and the building inspector was supposed to go back to do some more and look into it. Because it's potential that that might be a place where they could store some equipment. I don't know what the condition of it, maybe it's completely impossible, but it's something we need to look into.
Okay.
So I would pull that for May. So 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21, I have a lot of thoughts about. I I did speak with Alan today and get some further clarification on some of these articles. Article 17 is $8,100 for a power washer that was already purchased. So it would be replenishment of that operating line, since it was paid for out of his operating budget. Hold. Article 18, I haven't been able to get confirmation on the dollar amount. Right now, I only got invoices for about $3,200 worth, not $10,000 worth related to repairs for a truck.
That
But,
didn't pass inspection, right?
right, but
Yeah.
as a reminder, there are operating lines for all of these things. The next one, but if we were going to pay it, since it's already been done and we're supplanting his budget, that's the amount, and stabilization was the source. The next one is $22,000 for paving on Blackstone Street for curbing and then painting the curbs, which, based on my questions today, couldn't be submitted to Chapter 90 and had to be bid out because they didn't have the staffing in the highway department in order to do the work themselves. And so they went out to bid and they hired someone to do this work and paid this out of their operating budget. Okay,
So this is all reinstating spent funds.
right. I did ask the question, of course, and said to him today, you understand what my problem with this one in particular is, that you spent $20,000 out of your operating budget without planning for it out of operating, or if it should be spent there. I mean, I understand there is a staffing issue, but that is the sort of thing that would be nice to get a heads up on before, but I get it also needs to get done, right? So these are the weird sort of,
A quick question on that one, if you don't mind. Is there any funds in salaries due to the fact that we were understaffed that could be used to subsidize some of that?
You mean to pay for the contractor that did it instead of the staff doing it?
So
Right, even if it's 5,000 or 10,000 is something that could offset a little bit.
Right.
the biggest issue there, and I have looked very carefully at the salaries, is that we did have a long-term employee retire in July with a substantial amount of leave. And so that is the biggest issue when it comes to staffing in highway. In addition to, let's put it this way, we have savings in terms of rates that we're getting paid because there was, but not enough in order to subsidize something like this. But
Partial, no?
yes, and again, this is the other thing I would say, when we see operating requests come in the budget like this, much like the library, these things were expended, but these budgets are not in deficit at this point in the year. And yes, it is very early in the year and this is proactive, which we like, but there are other avenues later in the year if there was a necessity to fulfill these lines because of costs that we could take in order to still fund these things. But that it's unusual to see this sort of request at this point. And then the furnace replacement, I know Alan was here to talk about that. So, and I talked to him today and I mentioned the transferring part to him too, but he did say he would be okay with taking these off of the warrant. But honestly, if the town is willing to use stabilization to pay for these, that's an option. So I don't want to make that call.
Are we gonna update the language in the warrant to match the invoices at this point? We can't, right?
Oh, that'll come off. All of that stuff in red, anything that, so we never put a number on the printed warrant so that every bit of this, the warrant language is a guide. So the idea of what it is, the specifics are in the motions when we
fair
get
enough.
there. So that way, because if you print it and it's wrong,
Then it causes all sorts of
It's
problems.
there.
That, exactly, that's what, exactly my
so
question.
I
Just
have a
making
bunch
sure.
of thoughts around this. That
My natural inclination is not to pay out of stabilization or operating costs since we absolutely have to. So if he's not zero yet and he's just front running his budget, I have to think, don't we have to revisit this, especially where I see us avoiding putting more money into stabilization, CapEx, things like that.
The big question I have is when you're looking at these numbers, right? So we're looking at 81, so 18, 20, 30, 40, looking at about $50,000 in these, all of these coming out of stabilization. You know, is this something we're gonna be able to do at the end of the year? Backfill that 50,000 from other places?
Well, I guess my question would be, I have two thoughts about it. One is you should plan your spending if you can, to the extent that you can.
Well,
If these are costs that weren't anticipated and they need a funding source, then yes, I think if we had free cash and it wasn't an issue, we'd be paying them with free cash and we wouldn't really be scrutinizing as much. Because at the end of the day, we need as much room in that budget in the end potentially for other things as well. So that, you know,
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's two things on here that jump out. It's the truck repair and the street curbing are the two numbers that I say, that feels like something we could have anticipated.
Well,
You know, the furnace replacement, I think that falls into that building category, right? That we need to do, and it's a one-time expense more or less, but Blackstone curbing just surprises me.
it's unusual,
Yeah.
but it's done is the next part of that sentence.
When was it done?
September.
oh, I was gonna
It's
say,
recently done.
yeah, about 6 weeks ago.
And it's that part's unfortunate only because we did also just learn that I just found and sent to Alan and then did the paperwork done for this additional RAP funding, which is money related to winter, which we got another $186,000 for. That is totally reimbursable for sidewalk repair, street repair related to weather, which something like this could have. But the trade-off is, right, now we can do other work somewhere too. So it's really that it's, like I said, if we had $600,000 in free cash, we wouldn't be scrutinizing as much. It's just a tough year. And it's done. It's not gonna happen again, obviously, because this, you know, everything will change in the department. So I think if you're willing to support it with stabilization and if FinCom is willing to support stabilization as the source, which I won't presume, but I think that they would, then it's, gives us a little more room. But operationally, obviously, it's not something that I would recommend continuing to do in the future. And then.
We can also just leave them on, obviously, and as we get through finance committee and we get there, if we have to pass over them, we'll pass over them.
Well, that's what I'm suggesting, Lonnie, is rather than make that decision, we don't have to take it off tonight, but we still have to go to FinCom and discuss it with them. So I think we should just leave them on, but we don't have to figure out the exact number right now, but we won't take these ones off.
Okay, cool. I like that.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's fine if it passes. It's just unusual for us to recommend stabilization for this. But that's, so the next one we had talked about last time too, Article 21. Wait, that's the CDLs. I moved that up into Article 2. And then Article 22, that 24.8 for stormwater, as I mentioned last time, was funded already in the budget. So this article is unnecessary.
Right. So 21, we can cross it off because we've already,
I've moved it.
yes. And then
And 22, we don't need because it already exists in the operating budget. Okay. I got an email today that Article 23 is being pulled.
yes. This is the historic, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I believe Anne is on or was on to speak to the others. I think I'll just, before we get to Anne's, I'll just go to whatever I have left on here. I think.
Let me know where you want to jump.
Yeah, I'm just looking, hold on. No, I know I read in that email, they don't have numbers yet on any of these, so we're leaving them on until we have confirmation if they are ready or not ready. So even though today is the day. Article 30 is the one that I had put on about changing the day of town meeting from Friday night. This is totally up to you to leave it on or not.
I support that. I think it was,
Change it. I don't actually mind it being on Friday night because
think-
nothing else is planned, but I don't think the residents appreciate that sentiment. I think, we can leave it on and see if the residents say yes or no, or what do you
My,
think?
my only reluctance to leave it on for this is that a lot of the people that go to the annual town meeting know it's on Friday night. And a lot of pushback we've got, I know Lonnie and I have seen this, people at special town meetings get complaints that things should be in the annual town meeting because people show up for the budget. So it might be a better idea to leave this one for the annual, but I'm okay.
I
with
think
most of
I
it.
agree with that, Mike. I think we should definitely push this to the annual. I mean,
Yeah.
as much as I'd love to see it done for this year, I don't think it's right that we discuss it at a special and then not trick everybody, but people are confused at the annual, you know what I
Right.
mean?
I
That
just,
if we
I
talk
can,
about it at the annual, more people will
yeah,
know.
I can just see us changing it at the special, and then we didn't do the annual town meeting on a Friday night this year, and everybody thinks it's Friday night, and then,
Right, and show
you
up
know,
when
this, yeah,
I'm 100% okay with that. Yeah.
all right. So let's just,
I just
Well,
think if it
well,
comes up as a point of
yeah.
discussion every couple of years.
yeah, we'll
so
full 30.
Maybe we can encourage people not to have the prom that night.
Yeah, well,
Right, well,
right.
be careful what you wish for. It might turn out to be Saturday morning forever, so that's.
They can have the prom, they can have the prom Saturday morning.
Yeah.
So 31, 32, and 33 are the roads.
Yeah, and then 34, Laura, you said you thought they might not be ready on Pond Street.
They're not because the last vote that was taken tonight needed to be done in time for this document to be at town clerk's office the week
Okay.
before. So it's too late
All right,
unless.
so 34 is too late,
Right.
and 35 was the
It's
lease.
the Clough lease.
Yeah, so,
So that's the warrant. I don't know if it is still on to talk about the other ones.
well, but these are the ones we do every year, right?
No,
Okay. Replace what, that's right. He said one of these, Dan had pulled, and the other one about the windows should still be all set.
well, so they're, right, because they're meeting tomorrow, I guess, to discuss them, so they're here now, so the timing's not great, but worst case, I'm more comfortable with them passing over their articles, than if we don't have the numbers right now.
Yeah, let's
than
just leave
us
them on.
with- We can leave
Yeah.
them on until otherwise. So typically, the motion is, and I don't know if it's.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
only question I want to go, when we know about the senior center, but Article 9, we talked about the library hours. Do we just want to pull it, or do we want to leave it just to let people talk about it on the floor?
So
I would love to see it discussed, but if there's no funding source and it gets approved, are we going to?
Well, it would have to be we'd have to do it, the excess levy,
Well, right, and I
If we
think I
have-
just got an answer on that.
okay?
Everybody works. So many people on their own.
Yeah, right.
110.
There's a little. That's versus.
Hey, maybe we leave it, pass over it if we find out that it's not the best time to fund it.
That's what I'm suggesting is, because if we take it off, we shut the door. If we leave it on, then we still let it go through the process.
Right, if we pass over it, there's no real discussion on it, so, again, but we can, at least it's there if we did, the income everybody side, but my opinion.
Can I just say, I'd like to spend a little more time analyzing what the request actually is in terms of operationally. I'm at 100% in support of the library and
Right.
funding what they need. I want to make sure that we know what it is we're funding
Right.
before it goes to the floor. Like, I
Yeah.
think, which I'm not going to use the employee's name. I think they're doing an exceptional job, and I think they would be great as a full-time employee. That's a non-issue. My issue is I want to, as if it was the budget, I want to know the
Right.
details some more, and then you would choose to prioritize that as part of that. So, I mean,
I mean, as
Would we be
stated-
able to pull that information? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Lonnie. That's fine. Go ahead.
Just wondering would we be able to pull that information together before we meet with the finance committee so we can discuss that maybe as a group with the finance committee?
we have 2 weeks, basically.
Yeah, I'm okay leaving it on. My preference is this is done as part of the annual budget. And I think, Kim, I agree with you. I think this is more than 8 hours. I think this is a structural change for all the right reasons. And I think we got to be very clear with everybody why it's happening. Because I think 8 hours and even the 8 hours of access for 10 hours of you know what I mean? I think we want to remove any ambiguity if this is going to go through. And I think this is a structural discussion on how the operations of the library, which seems valid.
Well, then for everything that we talked about before, then we should pull it and push it off to the annual.
Well, to the budget.
Right.
I think and Andrew's still on the call. Not knowing the financial situation for next year, but I think if basically all in agreement that we want to prioritize it for the budget for next year as one of the things we strongly consider actually funding, if possible, right? Like,
I can't say that now because I don't know what other, no, but I mean, I think, and what I heard on this meeting was that and I was in a meeting when the prior board said, we'll put this off till the fall. And I thought, interesting, because it's really an operational study. And then what I'm hearing is a level of frustration, right or wrong, more right, that it keeps getting pushed.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to set that expectation. But I think I would expect that the library budget, if it were pushed off, is going to incorporate and working with you, Kim, to make sure from an HR standpoint, that you got the right operational structure in place. So you got coverage. I mean, the idea that you know, when I hear Andrew say, I am the only full-time employee and that somebody is, quote, second in charge, I said, well, that's not her duty. If she's going to be second in charge, make her second in charge with the job responsibilities, et cetera. Right? I think it's bigger than squeezing it in, although I respect what's trying to get done here.
Right.
I just don't think it's the right way to go.
We have Andrews raised his hand. He just wants to comment. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Andrew.
real
Yeah,
quick.
so I mean,
Real quick, guys.
oh, sorry. Go on, Lonnie.
Yeah, sorry, guys, and I apologize, and I hate to have to do this. I need to jump into another meeting where I'm away, and I didn't know we were gonna. I didn't know it'd be this late. I have 5 minutes to prep for it. I'm just gonna jump unless if there's any vote or something you might need, please just.
We're just gonna approve this, and pull all the ones we just talked about. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys.
We're
And
good.
I apologize immensely. I hate doing this, but I gotta jump. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm perfectly happy to work with Kim on the specifics of this. I just want to get a clarification. I mean, it sounds like what you're looking at is to pull it and to put it on for the ATM in the spring. Is that correct?
that's part of the budget.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I mean, if that's what it's going to take, I think that's fine. I mean, I know I've had conversations with you, Kim, in the past about how we can do this. I'm absolutely willing to work with you on, coming up with an agreeable plan. And like I said, if it's pushed to the ATM, I just need to know for sure, just in terms of, clarification here, what exactly is happening with the article.
So I think it's important, like as part of the budget process, that for the library, that the board is basically saying we support expanding the service level at the library and adding a position. That's a decision that you
Changing.
make as part of the organization, right? Like that's a big decision. I think it's the only downfall about this request ever is that it's always weighted against public safety or something else that always comes up more pressing, but the need has been proven. And, I think, well, I've said it 100
I mean, I
times.
would recommend keeping it for the FinCom discussion, even if it's giving FinCom a heads up that it's coming. I would expect, Andrew, that in your budget for FY24, we're going to see an increase in the salary line in benefits, basically because you want to convert an FTE and you'll have the supporting documentation working with Kim to explain, this is why we need it.
And he does.
Right.
But there's no guarantee, right?
Right, he does, every year he submits a request, every year it's ranked within the priorities that we're able to fund, and unfortunately, it just never makes it there. And that's why this year, right, we were like, we're treading cautiously, and thank goodness we actually did, right, because the budget is super tight. But I mean, not to be a fortune teller, but I do think we have some very good fiscal years right around the corner, potentially with new development in town. And I think we'll have some more options available to us. So
I would look at it from another way. At this point in time, Kim, do you have a sense within the town what other priorities might be coming up that people have in mind for the next budget cycle?
think we're gonna have to have some serious conversations around the structure of the highway department and whether or not that expands its roles. And we sort of formulate something under that. We're gonna have to fund a position in there with some qualifications that will have a salary attached to it. And then potentially the structure there. And if, you know, I think some of that is coming because of the timing. I think that more than public safety potentially this year
Right.
is going to be what we're focusing on through the budget. The board itself is going to have to make some decisions around that
Yep.
very soon, you know.
And included in that has to be something focused on maintenance
Mhm.
for the
Right.
buildings. I mean, that's what we talk about expanding the role. That has to, because we've been kicking that can down the road for a long time. and
Right.
It needs to be
Yeah,
addressed. So
maintenance,
that's,
facilities,
Right.
parks, water, roads, potentially. But those are conversations we have to have. But that's the only other thing that's pressing on the horizon that I see that's gonna require a little more.
and actually, one thing that kind of fits into this conversation, anybody who's been down at the south end of town at Hartford Ave East and Route 140 knows that there's an issue with that intersection. And also that, you know, there's been a,
Third time.
An accident there tonight.
yeah, well, there's also been there's a warehouse that was approved in Hopedale or in the process, and we have one here in Mendon. I spoke with Brian Murray, our state rep, because he was involved in, you know, repainting the lines and moving the stop line. And he's asked for support because he wants to pull the DOT back to look at it, because right now, you know, there's a piece of property on the corner that's for sale. And then the Green Store, which currently is a church, is for sale on the opposite corner. And I don't know how you solve that without expanding the turn lanes and everything.
Right.
But that, again, that all is kind of talked into the same conversation.
When I hear, Kim, what you say, it sounds as though I would be cautiously optimistic if from a resource standpoint, FTE standpoint, doesn't sound like there's a lot of noise out there yet to increase staffing outside of maybe highway, which would then be, I say I'm cautiously optimistic because that makes what Andrew's looking
Right.
to do a little more,
Realistic.
Right.
yeah. So that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll.
Trying to stay positive here.
Well,
Okay.
We'll
Right.
certainly get a request from Parks, as we do probably for a position.
Yep.
And we'll certainly get a request potentially to make another full-time position at the senior center, but we have added there in the
Mhm.
last couple of years, so.
Okay.
You know, it's,
I say you leave this on for discussion with FinCom. Maybe they actually feel really strongly about it.
So just to clarify, if we leave it on for that, we're finalizing the warrant tonight, right? So
Right.
if we leave it on for discussion with
Close the town
FinCom, we
Yeah.
have,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, we're not, what we're doing is finalizing what articles can be potentially
Right.
considered.
But so it would be on the printed
be
warrant
Yes.
for the town meeting.
Yes.
right? And then we could say,
Pass over it.
pass over it, right?
we could vote to pass over it, but that
Right.
doesn't mean that that is actually what will
Occurred.
happen.
Right. we
Which
could- we
is-
could
which
move
is
to
what
pass over it,
Town
right,
meeting is all about.
Right.
It's, you know. So just so we're clear, we got 3, 4, 5. We're gonna leave 9, 3, 4, 5, 10, 14, 15, 21, 22. 23, and I know Ann has got her hand raised, so. Ann, do you want to talk about these CPA articles, 24, 25, and 26?
We still don't have the amounts for them.
Right, but they're still, but we're not pulling them, because you're still gonna fund all of them through CPA, right?
Yes, the only thing is on the TAP Public Library, I think the Historical Commission wanted to pull, but we haven't discussed that at our meeting. So
The CPA has
So
not.
you want,
discussed
so
pulling that.
you're saying Article 23, we should not pull it, or?
that's
And
the
leave
one,
it
is that,
on?
I can't see, the. exact
23
one.
is yes, is the old Taft Library building, yes.
Dropped the ball there.
Yeah, Dan was saying that, yes, they wanted to pull it, so I guess you can pull
Yes.
it.
Okay, so that's 23. And then,
But then the other one, the 24 on the town hall windows keep, and then the one for
the historical records and then the one on the recreation.
Yeah, tennis courts, yeah.
Yeah. But I just had a question on 10, the senior center one. Did you say you're leaving that or pulling that?
And we're pulling that to move it to the ATM.
Okay, the only reason I would say you might want to keep it is that 52 Providence Street, we're hoping to put the RFP out for the affordable housing on the town property 52 Providence that's right next to it.
Right.
And that will require a public water supply. And depending on where we put the protection zone, it could affect the senior center. And so they might want to do some work as to where their public water supply might be, because if we have that information, then we can adjust the 52 Providence. And I don't know how much that would cost to do an analysis, but maybe they already have the money for that.
Well, we're talking about 10 is, and again, it reads available funds for the purposes of expansion of the senior center or anything in relation there too.
Right.
So I'm not
but
sure what, so we're not going to have the money or the funding to do anything with that now. So that's why we're just pushing it to the ATM. So I'm not sure there's any benefit, because everything you're talking about, we can still do it. We're just, we don't have any, there are no funds to do any of that.
Yeah, so I guess what I was saying is that the 52 Providence Street's going to need a public water supply. Senior Center will need a public water supply, and putting in the protection zones is really tricky on those two plots. And so if that article was left on, then maybe they could get a small amount of money so that they could do a study to figure out where their protection zones would be.
Well, you know what? We have other monies.
Okay.
We have other monies with grants that could potentially be used for that. And
Okay.
again, we just don't have any excess cash to do any of that anyways. So that's a good point. But, and that's really helpful, because and I would talk to Jack about that, because he's talking about a couple of other things rolling from this grant that we're just about finished up. And this stuff we can't really talk about yet.
All right.
So,
All right, I'll talk to Jack then.
okay.
All right.
Keep 9.
What's that?
Did we decide to keep 9?
Yes.
I'm okay with discussing that with FinCom. I'm not sure. I'm saying pull it, but if everybody thinks you should keep it, so.
I thought you wanted to keep it. so
I
we
want
could
this,
discuss.
but my
Yeah.
point is, we don't need to keep it to discuss it. And I think putting it up there and then not sure about the funding source and things like that and passing over something like that.
Andrew, I'm assuming it's this conversation. We're still talking about the same article. So discussion we're having is still to start discussing it with FinCom now, but pulling it for this special and moving it to the annual.
All right. All right. Yeah, no, I know that's what you're talking about. And my apologies. I keep forgetting to put my hand down. So sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I understood.
All right. So just to recap again, we're going to pull 3, 4, 5, 9, 10, 15, 16, 21, 22, 23, and then 30 and 34.
And I just want to be, I'm expressing an opinion on number 9. I'm not sure my opinion is agreed to. I just because I'm keep talking about it, doesn't mean that's the decision of the board.
So my thing is, so excess levy came in quite a bit higher than what's in here.
Did it?
$26,000.
Yeah, so what's the chances that we're gonna do all of this and then we're gonna have a little bit of extra to spread around?
So
We don't have to. I understand that we don't have to spend every bit of money that we
Right.
have.
So I can already tell you what I've done since getting that $26,000 sitting here, which is up for where the salaries are, I had to pay a portion of that with free cash, which made me really uncomfortable because all of that is within the operating budget. So I already swapped that money right into that line and increased the amount that we had available in free cash by
Yes.
that. Now I still need like $4,500 in free cash to make it, but that's what I've done. So it will change the amount of free cash that's currently not allocated to about 51,000. But again, free cash is that one time.
It's not
so it's,
operating, that's not
Um,
operating.
now, there's a possibility free cash comes back and it's 200,000, but I can tell you in previous years, we've left 100 in there just in case.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah, so to deal with a special piggybacked onto the ATM.
And I want to be fiscally responsible here, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I wish like, to me,
that's what we have to do.
Exactly. That's why we're here.
it just, not to keep harping on the highway piece, but this is what makes it feel sort of, and one is, I suppose one is an emergency and one is not, but these are operational costs too, that should have been planned for, that would have been considered as priorities against other requests, and that's where it becomes unfair, because these were already purchased, and, it would be like Andrew hiring a staff and then telling us later, right? So there has to be a better way to do this, and the budget is that process typically, so.
So for a motion to approve the warrant, I don't know if you got what I was saying, Laura, about, so, the article numbers changed, right? But,
Just raise your hand again.
I'm sorry, Andrew, you have another
Yeah,
comment?
well, I'm just trying to understand where you're at. So initially it was supposed to stay on here and now it's not on here.
Yeah, it's not gonna stay on for the STM because when we make this change, it's gonna be a permanent change recurring in the budget year over year. And that's not something that we're gonna do with a special. So we're gonna discuss it with FinCom. We're gonna definitely put it for discussion at the ATM this May.
So would we discuss it with FinCom
As part of the
later,
operating
later?
Yeah.
Okay, so in
Part of the
the
operating
spring.
budget.
Could even give them a heads up, it's coming at the.
Correct.
I mean,
We can, well,
We remove
They see it
this
every
one
year.
article.
They see it every
yeah,
year.
but it is it's a great point to start talking about it now to get
FinCom
them.
has been very supportive of recognizing and supporting the board's priorities regarding the budget, right? They've never really swayed. Sometimes they question why this instead of that, but the last couple of years,
Yeah.
despite whatever the situation, they recognize the list that you guys make when it's budget time, priority, and then they support it. So that, I would imagine it's the same, but they do vet this, they've seen this request
Yeah.
as many times as I've seen it, so I know, we've covered it.
So, I mean, I guess my question is, so when we're still meeting with the FinCom in a couple of weeks, and we're meeting specifically about the warrant, like, can we sort of put a, note in that we intend to sort of follow up on this and, I mean, is it
You
a
could say,
motivation for leaving it
FYI, you
on?
removed all these articles,
Right,
just so
this-
you
and
know,
this
and
is
one of
sort
them
of-
was library, you could have
Right.
that conversation.
That's what I'm wondering about. Are there ways to sort of you'd suggested at some point in thinking oh, can we leave it on to have that conversation? But we could still have that conversation in a couple of
course.
weeks to make sure
You know
that,
what the difference,
to state that it's a priority that we
Right.
consider it in the budget coming up.
Right, and I think we will be looking, the FinCom we will have those budget conversations. I mean, it's almost November now. We're gonna be having them in January.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it's
they're
gonna be right on the list. I mean,
Right.
Andrew's gonna be right in there. He already knows the calculations because he does it every
Yeah.
year.
I mean,
So-
it's fair to tell FinCom what's being pushed to ATM
Yeah,
from STM.
Right.
You know,
right, because of funding, there are a couple things we moved and considered.
because the point is, this is floating around out there now. We're gonna have to discuss everything on here with them and let them know what we did.
Okay.
Right, they're definitely gonna wanna know why we don't have stabilization, I would assume.
Yes. Right. So do we need to formalize a motion and take a vote to do this? Yes.
Yes, and usually the motion is, as amended, with approval review by town council and town administrator. That's usually the vote. So, because council still has to give it the one more look over, and I'm gonna pull the stuff tomorrow, and then that's the version that goes out. We don't bring it back one more time. That becomes the one.
All right.
I have actually one question about Article 27. It's for Anne. Is that the easement that Anne presented about? Is Anne maybe still there?
I don't know.
Let me look.
So it's looking for open space on a new development. I believe that it is. So she presented.
It's just saying Cape Road, which I don't. Applewood LLC. Okay, so that's Applewood LLC is at Cape Road. Yes, because I think is that maybe Brazza's place? But this is Applewood, which is just off of,
Is Applewood one of the new roads?
yeah, well, Applewood is, and when I'm looking here at the name on the deed, Brian Testa, this is the new development that's, across from the senior center.
Right.
Those houses up in
But I
there.
mean, is this the one that Anne presented about
Yes.
a few weeks ago?
Yes.
The easement to the open.
Yes.
To the open space. Okay, I
Yes,
just wanted to
yes.
make sure that I knew.
Yes.
Okay,
Excellent.
thank you.
All right. I move to approve the warrant as amended with approval from town administrator and town council.
I have a second. Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. We have a meeting, next meeting in 2 weeks. And I also, if you may have seen an email come through from the assessors, we have to have the tax classification hearing. And it's actually I think what day is the town meeting on?
14th.
On the 14th. I think we picked the 16th, I think. Or I picked the 16th. It was a couple of days later.
Yes, sir. Like we have our next meeting, then the following Wednesday is the tax classification meeting.
Yeah.
That Wednesday, I think.
Yeah. All right, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Oh, somebody just raised their hand.
Yeah, we're,
Aye.
my name is Kachi. We're from the Brookview Lane. I'm just wondering why we are not talking about that now. Is it being moved?
Say that again, sir?
I said my name is Kachi, and we are in the meeting for the Brookview Lane approval.
We accepted that already. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, well about Willowbrook Lane.
Sorry, can you say that again? I'm not hearing.
Brookview, I think you said Brookview Lane.
Brookview.
That was a motion.
That's the
think
one that
earlier.
wasn't, John, you mean that wasn't ready yet?
The public hearing?
Yeah, so that occurred at 7:20.
Six
6:20, sorry.
6:20,
And that was accepted, right?
right, for
Yeah,
Applewood.
the way it works, there were 3 of them that we voted it to be accepted, but it still has to go to town meeting in a
Okay.
few weeks. But it was,
Oh.
we did vote on it early on, yes.
So that's now
Got it.
going to be on the warrant.
Thank you.
and those will be accepted.
All right, got it. Thank you.
Sorry about
Who's
that.
got there? Who's got?
That's that person talking.
Okay.
I'm assuming they want to get plowed this winter, so.
Right.
It's important that it's accepted.
All right, so we're all set? All those in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
Thank you. Yes.